Mesopotamia. The very word means between the rivers, and even in its sound, there is a quiet rhythm, a flowing cadence like the waters of the Tigris and the Euphrates themselves. To think of this land is to think of beginnings not sudden or loud beginnings, but gentle ones, drawn out over centuries. The rivers carved valleys, carried silt, flooded fields, and receded again. And with each cycle, with each rising and falling of the waters, people placed seeds in soil, built small homes of mud brick, and gathered in communities that grew slowly, steadily, patiently, into towns and into cities. Close your eyes and imagine the stillness of dawn along a Mesopotamian riverbank. The horizon is soft with mist, and reeds bend and sway in the faintest breeze. The earth smells rich, damp, fertile. The sound of water moving is steady, like a heartbeat that has pulsed through the ages. Farmers, dressed simply, move quietly into the fields. They press seeds into the mud left behind by the flood, sandals sinking slightly with each step. The land is not easy, for the waters are unpredictable, and yet it is generous, for the soil is dark with promise. Children laugh nearby, their voices light and fleeting in the cool air. A goat wanders between small huts, nudged gently by a girl carrying a clay pot of water. The village hums awake not with noise, but with rhythm, the rhythm of daily life, repeated over generations. Fires are kindled, smoke rises into pale skies, and the sound of grinding stones hums as women prepare grain. Nothing is hurried, everything is steady. Each life, each gesture, is a thread woven into a tapestry larger than any single person. A fabric that would become civilization itself. From these quiet rhythms came what we now call the firsts. The first towns, built with walls of sun-dried brick. The first seeds of writing, scratched into wet clay with sharp reeds. The first whispers of laws, spoken by elders, later etched into stone. Not with sudden brilliance, but with patient repetition, did humanity begin to shape itself into something enduring. Names emerged from the soil. Uruk, Babylon. They echo even now, softly across centuries. But once they were not great empires or monuments. Once they were only villages along the rivers. Humble gatherings of people trying to make life steady, to shape order out of water and earth, to live together in a way that endured oddity night, when the work was done. When the fields lay quiet under the moon and the fires burned low, families gathered. They sat in circles, telling stories. Stories of gods who shaped the heavens and the earth, of floods that swept away the careless, of kings who ruled with favor from the divine. Children rested their heads against mothers' laps, lulled not only by the warmth of the fire, but by the slow cadence of voices carrying myths older than memory. The hush of the desert, the flow of the river, the endless canopy of stars overhead, these were the lullabies of Mesopotamia, what we remember as history was. In its time, simply life. Quiet mornings on the riverbank, fields dark with silt, clay, pots drying in the sun, hands pressing symbols into tablets of wet earth, fires flickering against mud walls at night. 1,000 repeated gestures, each small and ordinary, together creating the foundation upon which everything else would be built. The dream of Mesopotamia is not to dream of sudden wonders, but of patience. It is to wander slowly through reeds, beside a river. It is to feel the earth give softly beneath your feet. It is to hear the murmur of voices at dusk, telling stories of gods and kings, of floods and deserts, of life between two rivers. If Mesopotamia was the cradle, then Uruk was one of its first lullabies. It was not born all at once, as if by command or sudden vision, but rose slowly, like the steady layering of bricks one upon another. At first, only a village, a collection of small huts along the slow bend of the river. But over centuries, as people returned each season, planting and harvesting, building and repairing, it grew. Walls thickened, temples rose, and fields stretched further into the horizon. The story of Uruk is not a story of conquest or drama, but of persistence. Imagine a plain at dawn, the sun just beginning to wash the mud brick walls with pale gold. The city is quiet, save for the soft shuffle of sandals across dusty streets. Potters open their workshops, lifting clay vessels carefully to the air to dry. Weavers sit at looms, their fingers moving with practiced ease, thread by thread. Farmers led donkeys through narrow gates, their baskets heavy with grain. The hum of Uruk was not loud but constant, like a heartbeat. From every corner of the city came small sounds, grinding stones, splashing water, the thump of clay being shaped. 1,000 small tasks performed every day, generation after generation, until city emerged.at its heart stood the temple. The ziggurat, a great mountain of mud brick, layered upward toward the sky. It did not shine with marble or stone, but with simplicity. Each layer carried upward not only brick, but devotion. The priests moved quietly through its courtyards, tending altars, pouring offerings, marking the movement of stars in the sky. The temple was not simply a place of worship, but the pulse of the city, a reminder that the divine was woven into the daily. The city walls, thick and strong, did not only keep danger out. They marked a boundary between the wilderness beyond and the order within. Outside lay the desert, the marsh, the wildness of flood and wind. Inside lay the pattern of streets, the rhythm of fields, the hum of labor. Within those walls, life repeated itself in steady circles, seed to harvest, birth to death, day to night. And in Uruk, something quiet yet profound began to stir. Writing. At first, only marks pressed into clay to count sheep, to measure grain, to tally jars of oil. Simple signs, used to remember what the mind might forget. Yet slowly, they became more than numbers. They became symbols of words, of names, of thoughts. Each sign pressed into clay was a whisper into eternity. Picture a scribe, sitting cross-legged with a tablet of wet clay. His hand moves carefully, reed stylus pressing small wedges into the surface. He works not quickly, but steadily, shaping marks that carry meaning. Around him, life moves on, potters shaping vessels, women baking bread, children laughing in the street, but his work carries their memory forward, preserving it in clay. That will outlast the flesh-dotted to dusk. The city softened again. Fires flickered from rooftops as families gathered for the evening meal. Donkeys brayed in the distance, and the air filled with the smell of bread baking. People sat in circles, speaking quietly, their words blending with the night. Above them, the stars burned brightly, the same stars that guided farmers, priests, and kings alike. Uruk was not only a place, it was a rhythm, a pattern of labor and devotion, of walls and temples, of writing and memory. It was the quiet rise of the first city, not loud, but enduring, a place where humanity first began to gather in numbers, to build together, to dream together. And so, when we remember Uruk, we remember not only the city itself, but the countless small hands that shaped it, the potter's hands, the weaver's fingers, the farmer's steps, the scribe's stylus pressing into clay. Together, they built not only a city, but the very idea of civilization. There is something almost magical in the thought that the quiet act of pressing a reed into soft clay could change the course of humanity. Writing, in its earliest form, did not arrive with grandeur. It did not begin with poetry or history, but with counting. It began with numbers, with tallies, with records scratched into earth so that a farmer would remember how many sheep he had, or a merchant would know how many jars of oil were traded in Mesopotamia. Writing grew like the slow swelling of a river, quiet, steady, inevitable. Imagine a room lit by dim light, its walls cool with mud brick. A scribe sits cross-legged on the floor, before him a small tablet of wet clay. He takes a reed, cut sharp at the end, and presses it carefully, wedge by wedge, into the surface. Each mark is small, barely more than a line or triangle, yet each one holds meaning. A sheep, a bushel, a measure of beer. The scribe works slowly, his breath steady, his motions unhurried. Around him, the city hums with life. Outside, donkeys bray, women grind grain with stone. A child's laughter rises and falls in the street. But here, in this quiet corner, the sound is only of reed against clay, a soft rhythm, almost like a lullaby. The echo of the future being born taught at first. Writing was practical. It remembered what the mind might forget. But soon the marks began to shift. Symbols combined, grew, and stretched into words. Words that could name kings, gods, rivers. Words that could hold stories and laws. A clay tablet could become not just a list, but a voice carried across time. Picture shelves lined with tablets, each small and humble, drying in the air. They do not glitter like gold or silver, but they hold something more enduring. Within them is memory. Within them is continuity. They are the whispers of merchants, the records of farmers, the prayers of priests. Imagine now a young apprentice, learning the careful art. His master guides his hand, showing him how to press the reed just so, how to keep the lines straight, how to let the marks speak. The boy's eyes are wide with concentration. His hand trembles, but the clay is forgiving. Mistakes can be smoothed, the surface pressed again. Slowly, patiently, he learns, until his own marks begin to carry meaning. At night, when the tablets were set aside and the lamps burned low, perhaps the scribes looked upward. They saw the stars stretched across the black sky, infinite, silent. They must have wondered, if these tiny marks in clay could hold memory, what might the heavens themselves record? What stories were written in the constellations? What messages? In the movements of the planets? Writing was not loud. It did not burst forth like fire. It crept in like water seeping into earth, quietly filling the cracks of memory, gently shaping the future. With each mark pressed into clay, humanity whispered to itself, I was here. This mattered. Remember. And so, the invention of writing was not a single moment, but 1,000 slow gestures, repeated by countless hands. It was the soft echo of clay tablets, stacked in storms, buried in ruins, waiting to be found again centuries later. It was the steady persistence of people who believed that memory should last, that voices should be carried beyond the moment of their speaking. When we think of Mesopotamia, we often imagine the rising of great temples, the ziggurats, those layered mountains of mud brick that stretched upward from the plains as if to bridge the world of humans and the heavens above. Yet their story, like so much in this land, was not one of sudden grandeur, but of quiet repetition, of slow layering, of countless hands shaping clay into bricks, and bricks into walls, and walls into temples that endured through centuries. Close your eyes and picture the horizon of ancient Mesopotamia. The land is flat, wide, and endless, save for the slow winding of the rivers and the dark line of reeds along their banks. The sun is rising, washing the mud brick homes with a pale glow, and in the distance, one structure rises higher than the rest, not sharp, not polished, but stepped and solid, as though the earth itself had chosen to lift part of its body toward the skies. This is the ziggurat, a temple built not for human comfort but for divine presence, a place where heaven and earth could meet in silence. The first temples were not vast. They were small shrines, rooms with altars, places where offerings of grain, oil, or milk were left for the gods. But over generations, as villages became towns, and towns became cities, the temples grew. Each layer was built upon the one before, raised higher, broader, stronger. The ziggurat of yore, perhaps the most famous, stood like a mountain in the desert, a staircase of mud and baked brick, climbing toward the sun. Its walls, thick and heavy, absorbed the heat of the day, releasing it slowly at night like the steady breath of the earth. The steps leading upward were not meant for crowds, nor for noisy gatherings. They were meant for priests, for chosen individuals who carried offerings, chants, and prayers to the very top, where a small chamber waited. There, in the quiet of the highest level, surrounded by open sky and endless horizon, the priest would lay food and drink, pour oil, burn incense, and murmur words to the unseen. It was a place not of spectacle, but of stillness. Imagine the climb. The priest steps carefully, slowly, each foot pressing against sun-warmed bricks. The air is dry, carrying the faint scent of dust and clay. Below, the city stretches out small. Homes, narrow streets, donkeys pulling carts, smoke rising from hearts. Above, only sky, vast and infinite. At the top, the chamber is simple. A table of stone, vessels of clay, perhaps a small fire flickering. The priest places bread upon the altar, pours oil into a bowl, and whispers words into the silence. No thunder answers, no sudden sign appears, only the steady beat of the heart, the rustle of wind, the distant hum of life below. For the people of Mesopotamia, the ziggurat was not simply a building. It was a presence. It was the city itself made visible, lifted toward the heavens. Its shadow stretched across the fields, reminding farmers that the gods watched over their labor. Its steps reminded scribes that knowledge was a gift of the divine. Its sheer endurance reminded rulers that their power was temporary, but the gods were eternal. And yet, for all their size, the ziggurats were quiet things. Built from earth, they returned slowly to earth. Their bricks, sun-dried and fragile, crumbled if untended. Their walls needed constant repair, layer upon layer of new clay pressed against the old. They rose not because of grand engineering, but because of constant, patient work done by countless hands, nameless and forgotten, who mixed clay, carried baskets, laid bricks. Each one, with each movement, whispered into history. At night, the ziggurat stood dark against the sky, its edges softened by starlight. Families in the city below would look up as they shared their evening meal. The temple was always there, a reminder that their lives were woven into something larger, something beyond the fields, beyond the city walls, a reminder that in the silence above the earth, the gods listened. The rituals of the temple were steady and repetitive. Each morning, fires were lit. Each day, bread was baked and placed on the altar. Each evening, incense curled upward into the fading light. The priests tended the temple not as rulers but as caretakers, repeating gestures that had been repeated by those before them, and that would be repeated by those after. The temple was not about one moment, but about endless continuity, a circle of devotion that stretched across generations. Picture, for a moment, the storerooms of the temple. Within them were jars of grain, amphorae of oil, baskets of dates, offerings from the people, gathered not as wealth for the priests, but as sustenance for the temple itself, which was considered the house of the god. The temple did not stand alone. It breathed with the life of the city, and the city breathed with it. Farmers brought their share, potters craft vessels, scribes marked records on clay tablets, all to keep the rhythm unbroken, and in this way, the ziggurat was not only a stairway for the gods, but a mirror of the people. It rose because they rose. It endured because they endured. It crumbled if they neglected it, and it grew if they tended it. It was both stone and spirit, both earth and aspiration. Even now, when we look at their ruins, softened by time and wind, there is a hush about them. They no longer serve offerings, no longer echo with chants, no longer glow with fires, and yet they stand, quiet, weathered, patient, a reminder that the first steps humanity took toward the divine were not thunderous, but soft. They were not hurried, but slow. They were not demanding, but reverent. The ziggurat was not a monument to power, but to presence, a silent staircase rising from the dust, carrying with it the small, steady footsteps of a people who believe that between earth and sky there must always be a place to meet. In the quiet unfolding of Mesopotamia's story, after rivers had nurtured the soil, after villages had grown into towns, after ziggurats had lifted slowly into the skies, there came another gentle shaping, the shaping of order. For with many people living together, with fields expanding, with temples growing, with trade flowing through narrow streets, there arose a need for something steady, something more enduring than the fragile memory of words spoken. And so the first kings stepped into history, and with them the first laws. But do not imagine these kings as fierce warriors thundering across plains with swords and shouts. Picture instead a quieter scene, one that belongs to the rhythm of Mesopotamia. A ruler sits not upon a golden throne in a palace of marble, but upon a seat of wood in a hall of clay brick. He was not crowns of jewels, but a simple headdress, heavy with cloth, marked by small ornaments. Around him are scribes with tablets of wet clay, priests with offerings, farmers with petitions. The ruler listens. He listens as men and women speak of disputes, land divided, oxen borrowed, debts unpaid. He does not thunder commands, but speaks softly, allowing scribes to press his words into tablets, to preserve them, to give them weight beyond the fleeting moment. The earliest kings of Mesopotamia were not only warriors, but caretakers of rhythm. Their duty was to keep the fields watered, to keep canals flowing, to keep temples supplied, to keep disputes from breaking the fragile balance of life between the rivers. In their hands rested not merely power, but responsibility, the responsibility of shepherds guiding flocks. It is no wonder, then, that many kings were described in their time as shepherds of the people. For what is a shepherd if not one who guards, who guides, who keeps the flock together through seasons of flood and drought? And yet, rulers needed more than gentle presence. They needed words that endured. Spoken commands vanish, but words pressed into clay last. Thus arose laws, quiet in their power, yet vast in their endurance. The most famous of these, of course, belonged to Hammurabi of Babylon. His code etched into stone spoke not in thunder, but in rhythm, line after line, decree after decree, each one a whisper of order in a land that might otherwise fall into chaos. Imagine the great stele of Hammurabi, a tall black stone polished, rising silently from the earth. At its top, carved in relief, the king stands before Shamash, the god of justice, receiving authority, not by conquest, but by divine gift. Below, in careful lines, the laws stretch downward like the flow of a river. The stone does not shout. It does not move. It stands patient, quiet, carrying its words across centuries. It whispers of theft and marriage, of trade and injury, of property and inheritance. Each law is steady, each line a stone laid in the wall of order. But let us not imagine only the famous. Long before Hammurabi, kings and priests shaped smaller codes, local decrees, lists of decisions pressed into clay. These too were laws, though humbler, A farmer's dispute with his neighbor over an irrigation ditch, written down so it could be remembered. A debt owed for a jar of oil, pressed into clay so it could not be denied. A marriage arranged, a contract signed, all sealed with marks that turn fleeting words into lasting truth. Life in Mesopotamia flowed around these laws not as around heavy chains, but as around channels dug to guide water. Just as canals guided the rivers, so too did laws guide the people. They did not stop the flow of life. They shaped it, channeled it, carried it gently through the plains. Without them, the waters of society might spill wildly, flooding fields, eroding order. With them, life moved in quiet balance. Picture then a city at dusk. Farmers return through its gates, their baskets heavy with grain. Scribes sit at low tables, shaping contracts into clay. Priests light fires in the temple courtyards, and in the palace hall, the ruler hears the last disputes of the day. Outside, the city hums softly, smoke rising from hearths, children playing in narrow lanes. Inside, words are spoken, pressed into clay, set aside to dry. A man's claim against his neighbor, a woman's protection of her dowry, a merchant's record of trade, all preserved, all remembered, all given weight by the authority of king and lord. Tonight, when silence falls, the ruler sleeps not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. His people lie in their homes, knowing that in the morning the fields will still be theirs, the canals still flowing, the temples still tended, because order has been shaped not by accident, but by care. What is striking, when one looks back across these centuries, is not the drama of battles or the flash of crowns, but the persistence of quiet acts, the making of a tablet, the carving of a stone, the repeating of judgments, the listening of rulers to the voices of the people. Civilization did not grow through chaos, but through order, slowly, softly, carefully built. Even now, when fragments of these tablets are found, when the black stone of Hammurabi stands in museums, one feels not the weight of command, but the hush of memory. These were words shaped to endure, pressed into clay not with haste, but with patience. They whisper still, across the centuries, of a people who believed that justice could be steady, that life could be guided, that order could be born from silence. And so, kings and laws did not emerge as thunder. They emerged as gentle dawn. They were the quiet birth of order, shaped not by noise but by care, not by haste but by patience, not by chaos but by rhythm. They were the steady heartbeat of Mesopotamia, the soft pulse that carried civilization forward. One line of clay, one whisper of law at a time. Civilization does not live alone. Just as a river needs tributaries, and fields need rain, so too do cities need threads that connect them to the world beyond their walls. In Mesopotamia, those threads were trade routes, dusty roads stretching across deserts, boats drifting down rivers, caravans moving slowly across plains. Out of these paths of movement came not only goods but ideas, not only wealth but whispers of distant places, all woven softly into the fabric of daily life. Imagine a morning at the city gates of Ur or Uruk. The sun has barely risen, yet the air already carries a faint shimmer of heat. Donkeys stand tethered, their packs heavy with goods, jars of oil, bundles of wool, sacks of grain. Merchants adjust straps, tighten ropes, murmur to their animals. Beyond the gate, the road stretches outward, a thin line vanishing into the horizon. Some caravans will follow it only to the next town. Others will walk for weeks, even months, before reaching distant markets. The movement is not hurried. Caravans are slow, patient things. A donkey does not race. It plods steadily, step after step, carrying burdens heavier than its body seems to allow. A merchant does not rush. He walks beside the animals, eyes watching the road, hands steady. On his staff, the rhythm of trade is like the rhythm of Mesopotamian life, itself repetitive, enduring, unbroken. Each caravan is like a thread, weaving the city into a greater tapestry that stretches across deserts, mountains, and seas. Along the rivers, boats drift lazily with the current, their hulls heavy with reeds, timber, or grain. Boatmen push poles into the water, guiding the craft along the bends of the Euphrates. The air is filled with the creak of wood, the splash of oars, the call of voices across the banks. By river, goods move more swiftly, yet the feeling remains. The same slow, gentle, inevitable. The rivers themselves are trade routes, carrying not only silt and water, but jars of wine, blocks of stone, baskets of dates. What did they trade? The list is endless, yet each item tells a story. From the north came timber, dark and strong, to be shaped into beams for temples. From the east came metals, copper, tin, gold gleaming softly in the light. From the south came reeds for baskets, bitumen for building, fish from the marshes. From the west came wool, wine, and grain. And from beyond distant lands that seemed almost mythical came lapis lazuli, its deep blue shining like the night sky, and cornelian, glowing red like the fading sun. Picture a marketplace within the walls of a Mesopotamian city. There is warm, filled with the mingling scents of baked bread, oil, and spices. Merchants sit on low stools behind baskets and jars. Women examine fabrics, running their fingers across wool dyed in gentle colors. A child laughs as he bites into a date, its sweetness filling his mouth. The marketplace hums, not with shouting, but with soft exchanges, with murmured bargains, with steady trade that has gone on for centuries and will continue for centuries. More, each object exchanged carries more than material worth. Each carries memory. Each carries connection. A jar of oil is more than food. It is a link between farmer and merchant, between field and city. A bead of lapis lazuli is more than ornament. It is a thread binding Mesopotamia to mountains far away, to people unseen but imagined. In this way, trade is not only movement of goods, it is movement of presence. It is the weaving of lives across distance. Caravans did not travel only with goods. They traveled with stories. Around campfires in the desert night, merchants spoke softly of the lands they had seen. They told of mountains where snow never melted, of seas that stretched endlessly, of forests so dense that the sun barely touched the ground. Around the fire, with stars burning overhead, others listened, their minds drifting into places far beyond their own horizons. These stories, like goods, were carried home, adding to the quiet richness of Mesopotamian life. Imagine such a camp. The desert is cool after the heat of day. The animals are tethered, their packs removed, their bodies resting. Fires flicker, casting gentle light on faces. Bread is shared, water poured carefully, for each drop is precious. Voices murmur in the darkness, telling tales of distant kings, of foreign gods, of markets far away. The stars are endless, and yet, in their vastness, they seem to listen. In this silence, trade becomes more than exchange. It becomes communion between people, between lands, between the seen and the unseen. The roads themselves became patterns of memory. Each bend, each well, each resting place was known, repeated, remembered. Generations of merchants followed the same paths, their footsteps, pressing faint but enduring marks into the earth. The roads were not paved, not carved in stone, yet they existed, drawn into the land by repetition, by patient movement. They were lines of connection, invisible yet stronger than walls. And so, trade shaped Mesopotamia not with noise, but with rhythm. It fed the temples, supplied the cities, adorned the gods with jewels, clothed the rulers in wool, filled the storerooms with grain. Yet beyond material wealth, it shaped the imagination. It taught that the world was vast, that other people lived beyond the horizon, that life was not bound by the walls of one city, but stretched outward endlessly. Even now, when archaeologists uncover beads of lapis or fragments of timber, they find not only objects but echoes of this vast network. They find whispers of connections, the quiet hum of trade that once moved like a heartbeat across deserts and rivers. And in those whispers, one hears again the soft plodding of donkeys, the steady creak of boats, the murmur of merchants, the hush of stars above desert camps. Trade was not conquest. It was not thunder. It was not loud. It was the soft weaving of life, the gentle binding of city to city, land to land, people to people. It was the silent weave of connections, carrying Mesopotamia forward, not in shouts, but in footsteps, not in battles, but in caravans, not in noise, but in whispers. If Mesopotamia was called the cradle of civilization, it was not because of its palaces or its armies, but because of its fields. Everything began with soil and water, with seeds pressed gently into the earth, with the rising and falling of floods that marked the passing of time. Between the Tigris and the Euphrates, life did not move according to clocks or bells, but according to rhythms older and slower, the rhythm of seasons, of planting and harvest, of flood and drought. Imagine, for a moment, standing at dawn on the edge of a Mesopotamian field. The air is cool, though the promise of heat waits in the rising sun. Reeds whisper softly along the canals, and the scent of wet earth rises into the morning. Farmers move slowly, their sandals pressing into damp soil, their hands carrying baskets heavy with seeds. They do not hurry, for farming is never hurried. They move with patience, pressing seeds into furrows, covering them gently, trusting that time will do the rest. Agriculture here was both a gift and a challenge. The floods of the rivers brought rich silt that nourished the land, but the waters also came with unpredictability, sometimes too high, sometimes too low, sometimes too late, sometimes too soon. To live here was to live in constant balance, shaping canals to guide water, digging ditches to carry it, building levees to hold it back. The work was endless, repeated season after season, year after year, generation after generation. Yet in that repetition lay the heart of civilization. Picture the canals, narrow streams cut by human hands, lined with reeds and clay. Water trickles through them, shimmering under the sun, flowing from the great rivers into the fields. Along the edges, children play, their feet splashing in the shallow water. Farmers walk beside them, adjusting gates of wood or stone, diverting water where it is needed. The sound of trickling water becomes a lullaby, steady and unchanging, binding the people to the land. The fields themselves stretch outward, not in neat squares, but in long strips, each belonging to a family, each worked with steady care. Barley was the lifeblood of these fields, resilient, enduring, growing tall and golden beneath the sun. Wheat too found its place, though more delicate. Dates hung from palm trees at the edges of fields, their sweetness a gift in a land of heat. Lentils, onions, garlic, and cucumbers filled gardens, their scents mingling with the earth. Each harvest was more than food, it was survival. It was ritual. It was the quiet pulse of life. Seasons unfolded not with abrupt change, but with gentle shifts. Spring came with floods, carrying silt and water into the fields. Farmers moved quickly. Then, repairing canals, sowing seeds, watching the rivers carefully. Summer brought heat, long, heavy days when water was precious, when shade was rare, when the earth cracked if left untended. Autumn was the season of harvest, when barley turned golden, when sickles moved slowly through the fields, when baskets overflowed with grain. Winter was quieter, the land resting. Though life continued with the tending of animals, the mending of tools, the telling of stories by the fire. Imagine harvest time. The air is dry, the sky clear. Farmers move in lines through the fields, their hands steady on sickles of flint or bronze. The sound is gentle grain rustling, stalks falling, baskets filling. Children follow, gathering stray stalks, laughing as they run between the rows. At the edge of the field, donkeys stand tethered, waiting to carry the grain back to the city. The work is slow, repetitive, almost meditative. Each stalk cut is a whisper of survival, a promise of bread, a step in the endless rhythm of life. In the villages, the harvest becomes a quiet celebration. Grain is threshed, the chaff blown away by steady winds. Clay ovens glow with the warmth of fresh bread. Families share meals of barley cakes, lentils, dates, and milk. Their voices low, their hearts steady. There are no feasts of loud music or extravagant wealth. Only the simple joy of enough, the knowledge that the storehouses will hold grain through the winter, that the family will endure. Animals too were part of this rhythm. Sheep grazed on the edges of fields. They were soft and valuable. Goats provided milk, their bells tinkling softly as they moved. Oxen, slow and strong, pulled plows through the soil, their hooves pressing deep into the earth. Each animal had its place, its role, its rhythm. They were not mere possessions, but companions in the slow unfolding of daily life. The gods were present in this rhythm as well. Farmers did not plant or harvest without thought of the divine. Temples received offerings of grain and oil, for it was believed that the gods themselves fed upon these gifts. Festivals marked the turning of seasons. Prayers rose with the rising of floods. Chants accompanied the sowing of seeds. The land was sacred, the harvest a blessing, the toil itself a form of worship. At night, after the fields grew quiet, the stars filled the sky. Families sat outside their homes, their air cooling. After the heat of day, they spoke softly, telling stories of past floods, of good harvests and bad, of gods who blessed or punished. The smell of earth lingered, the sound of insects hummed in the dark. The fields, though silent, seemed alive, breathing, waiting, carrying within them the promise of another season. What is remarkable, looking back, is not the drama of great events, but the persistence of this rhythm. For thousands of years, people rose with the sun, walked to the fields, tended the canals, pressed seeds into soil, harvested grain, and returned home at dusk. Empires rose and fell, kings came and went, temples grew and crumbled, but the fields remained, tended by hands both forgotten and remembered. Civilization endured not because of conquest, but because of barley and dates, because of water and soil, because of farmers who repeated the same quiet acts again and again. Even now, when one stands among the ruins of Mesopotamian cities, one feels the presence of those fields. The ziggurats may rise, the palaces may impress, but beneath it all lies the soil, the canals, the silent rhythm of agriculture. It was here, in the quiet turning of seasons, that civilization truly rested, and so the story of Mesopotamia is not one of noise, but of silence. It is the silence of fields waiting for rain, the silence of seeds sprouting unseen, the silence of harvest under the sun. It is the silence that nurtured life, that carried people through centuries, that whispered gently the promise of tomorrow. Civilizations live not only in their fields and rivers, not only in their temples and laws, but in their memory. And in Mesopotamia, Memory was given form not in parchment or paper, not in bound books or ink, but in clay. It was here, between the rivers, that humanity first found a way to trap words, to preserve thoughts, to give permanence to what would otherwise fade like breath into the air. The story of Mesopotamian writing is not the story of a sudden invention, but of slow unfolding, of soft impressions made again and again until memory itself could be carried forward. Imagine a scribe seated cross-legged in a quiet courtyard. Before him is a tablet of damp clay, smooth and pliant, resting upon a small wooden board. In his hand he holds a stylus, not of metal or ink, but of reed, cut at an angle to make a sharp wedge. With patient movements, he presses the tip into the clay, line after line, mark after mark. Each impression is small, each stroke quiet, yet together they form words, sentences, records. The stylus makes no sound except the faint scratch of reed against clay, and yet, in that silence, memory is born dotty first. These marks were simple pictures, drawings of grain, of sheep, of jars. They were tallies, records of goods, reminders of debts, but over time they grew more abstract, more efficient, until they became the wedge-shaped symbols we call cuneiform. Each mark stood not for a thing alone, but for a sound, a syllable, a fragment of speech. With this, writing broke free from the narrow world of counting and entered the vast world of storytelling, law, and thought. Picture the shelves of a temple archive, rows upon rows of clay tablets, stacked carefully, each one filled with impressions. Some record harvests, so many measures of barley, so many jars of oil. Others record contracts, a marriage arranged, a loan agreed, a field divided. Still others hold hymns to the gods, prayers written so they might be spoken again and again. The tablets are small, heavy, silent, yet within them are voices, preserved across centuries. Voices of priests and farmers, of merchants and rulers, of scribes who pressed their words into clay and left them to dry beneath the Mesopotamian sun. The act of writing itself was slow, meditative, almost sacred. A scribe did not rush. Each stroke of the stylus required care, for once pressed, it could not be erased. The clay held memory firmly, without forgiveness. To be a scribe was to live in patience, to breathe in rhythm with the stylus, to carry the weight of words. Scribes were not ordinary laborers, they were guardians of memory, keepers of knowledge. Their education was long, their training difficult, their role essential. In a world where so much could be lost to flood or fire, scribes gave permanence to the fragile whispers of life. Think of a child beginning his training. He sits beside an elder scribe, tablet before him, stylus in hand. His first marks are clumsy, uneven, the clay scarred with uncertain lines. The elder corrects him gently, guiding his hand, showing him how to hold the reed, how to press firmly but not too deep, how to keep the line straight. Day after day, the child practices, filling tablet after tablet with signs. He copies lists of words, lists of goods, lists of names. Slowly, his hand grows steady, his marks more sure. In time, he becomes a scribe, trusted to record the life of his city through writing. Mesopotamia gave birth to memory not bound by voice. Myths were preserved, their rhythms carried across centuries. Laws were written, their weight extended beyond the life of a king. Prayers were fixed, so they could be spoken long after the first voice had faded. Even letters moved along trade. Roots, tablets wrapped in clay envelopes, sealed with cylinder seals that bore the marks of families and merchants. To hold such a tablet was to hold not only clay, but prisons of voice captured, waiting to be read aloud. The cylinder seal itself was a quiet marvel, A small stone carved with delicate images rolled across wet clay to leave behind repeating designs. Lines, gods, heroes, and symbols all impressed themselves upon tablets and envelopes. These seals were more than decoration. They were signatures, identities, the mark of trust. When a merchant sealed a tablet, when a ruler sealed a decree, they left not only words but images, marks of who they were. In this way, writing was bound not only to clay but to art, not only to words but to images. Imagine an evening in a temple. School. The sun has set, but lamps burn softly, their flames flickering against mud brick walls. A group of students sits in silence, their heads bent over tablets. The air is filled with the faint smell of oil, the warmth of clay drying, the soft scratch of reeds against damp surfaces. The teacher walks slowly among them, offering corrections, murmuring encouragements. Outside, the city is quiet, its people at rest. Inside, memory is being formed one mark at a time, one child at a time, one tablet at a time, and then there were the stories. The great epics of Mesopotamia, tales of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, of floods that swept across the earth, of gods who shaped the world. These too found their home in clay. They were not shouted, not written hastily, but pressed carefully into tablets, each line a whisper of myth, each mark a bridge between voice and permanence. Even now, when fragments of these tablets are uncovered, when lines of cuneiform are translated, the voices return. Across thousands of years, they speak again, quiet but enduring. The beauty of Mesopotamian writing lies not in its speed, but in its slowness. To press words into clay required time, required intention. Nothing was casual, nothing was fleeting. Each word had weight, each sentence permanence. It was writing not for distraction, but for endurance. A letter sent to a distant land might take weeks to arrive, but when it did, it carried with it not only words, but presence, preserved in clay. And so, the birth of writing was the birth of memory itself. It was the moment when voices could travel beyond the breath that spoke them, when thoughts could last beyond the mind that dreamed them. It was the soft, quiet moment when humanity found a way to carry itself forward. Even now, when we look upon these tablets in museums, we see not only clay but lives. We see farmers counting their grain, rulers shaping their decrees, priests singing their hymns, children learning their letters. We see a world bound not by silence, but by memory. And, in that memory, we hear again the whisper of reeds against clay, the hush of scribes at work, the gentle birth of writing. Civilizations often leave behind stones that rise against the sky. In Egypt, the pyramids lift like sharp triangles of eternity. In Greece, columns of marble stand against the wind. But in Mesopotamia, the earth itself became sacred. Here, in the land between the rivers, people shaped mud and clay, stacking it higher and higher, until temples rose like soft mountains from the plains. These were not built of stone, for stone was rare, but of sun-dried bricks, fragile yet enduring. They were not sharp, but gentle, with sloping sides and steps that seemed to carry the eye upward. Slowly, like a prayer made visible, imagine the city of yore, with its great ziggurat standing in the heart of the settlement. Around it stretched streets of houses, courtyards and workshops. Beyond them lie canals and fields, green and golden beneath the sun. But in the center, rising above it all, is the temple, a layered tower, each level smaller than the one below, built of clay bricks, their surfaces coated in bitumen, their edges glimmering in sunlight. It does not pierce the sky like a pyramid, but it climbs patiently, level by level, as if mimicking a mountain where none naturally stand dotted at dawn. The temple is quiet. Mist rises from the river, and the bricks glow softly in the first light. Priests ascend the steps slowly, their robes brushing against the clay. Each step is deliberate, each movement measured. They carry offerings, bowls of grain, jars of oil, small figurines shaped by hand. At the top, in the shrine, they place these gifts before the gods, murmuring prayers in voices low and steady. The smoke of incense drifts upward, mingling with the pale light of morning. The city below stirs awake, but here, atop the ziggurat, the silence is deep, almost eternal. Temples were more than places of worship. They were the heart of the city's life. Within their walls, scribes kept records, merchants struck deals, and leaders sought guidance. The temple stored grain, redistributed food, collected offerings, and oversaw canals. In many ways, the temple was not only a home for gods but a center of administration, a place where the threads of the city came together. Its bricks held not only prayers but decisions, not only offerings but power. Yet even in this, its presence was quiet, its authority expressed not in sudden shouts but in steady rhythms. The ziggurat itself was a bridge between earth and sky, between people and gods. To climb its steps was to move upward, away from the dust of daily life, toward the realm of the divine. The gods of Mesopotamia were many, each bound to place and power. In Lil, the lord of air. In Nana, radiant in love and war. Nana, the moon, that watched the night. Each god had a temple, each temple a rhythm of rituals. To enter was to step into a space where ordinary time softened, where silence deepened, where clay and spirit intertwined. Picture the interior of a temple at dusk. Lamps burn softly, their flames flickering against mud brick walls. The scent of incense lingers, sweet and heavy. Statues of gods stand upon altars, their eyes wide, their forms shaped of gold or wood or clay. Priests move slowly, pouring libations, chanting hymns that echo gently through the chamber. Outside, the city hums with life, merchants closing their stores, families preparing meals, children playing in narrow streets. Inside, the world feels still, suspended, as if the gods themselves listen in the quiet glow. The construction of a ziggurat was itself an act of patience. Thousands of bricks shaped by hand, dried in the sun, carried one by one to build the layers. Workers mixed mud with straw, pressed it into molds, left it to harden beneath the heat of summer. Then they stacked the bricks row upon row, tier upon tier, until the temple rose slowly from the plain. Each brick was small, each effort humble, yet together they formed a mountain. It was the rhythm of hands, repeated endlessly, that gave the ziggurat its shape. Even the bricks bore memory. Many were stamped with inscriptions, marks of kings who commissioned them, prayers pressed into clay before it dried. These bricks, silent and small, carried names forward, binding rulers to gods, temples to time. When archaeologists uncover them today, they hold not only clay but whispers of devotion, traces of power, fragments of lives once lived beneath the Mesopotamian sun. The ziggurats were not eternal. Rain and wind wore down their surfaces. Floods softened their bricks. Time reduced them to ruins. Yet even in ruin, they endure. Mounds of clay still rise in the landscape, their shapes softened, their edges blurred. Standing before them, one feels not grandeur but gentleness, not triumph but persistence. They remind us that civilization does not always shout. Sometimes it builds with mud, layer by layer, quietly, patiently, until mountains of memory stand. Where there were none at night, the ziggurat glowed with lamplight. Flames flickered in upper chambers, their light visible across the city. People looked up from their courtyards, seeing the glow, feeling the presence of the gods above them. The ziggurat became not only a building but a beacon, a reminder that life was watched over, that the divine lingered near, and in the silence of night, beneath a sky of countless stars, the temple seemed less like a building and more like part of the heavens themselves. The beauty of Mesopotamian temples is not in their scale alone, but in their softness. Built of clay, they were fragile, yet they endured. Shaped by countless hands, they carried within them the patience of generations. Rising slowly from the earth, they reflected the slow rhythms of the land itself, floods and droughts, planting and harvest, days and nights. They were not monuments of conquest, but of connection, not shouts of power, but whispers of devotion. Even today, when one looks upon the ruins of Ur or Babylon, when one sees the weathered remains of ziggurats, one feels that same quiet presence. The bricks may be crumbling, the walls eroded, but the shape remains, the patient climb upward, the soft mountain of clay. It is as if the people of Mesopotamia still whisper through these ruins, reminding us that even in fragility there is endurance, even in clay there is memory, even in silence there is the divine. In the land between the rivers, where floods and droughts tested endurance, where fields needed tending and canals needed care, there arose not only temples and scribes, but rulers. Yet Mesopotamian kingship was not loud, not thunderous like the clash of armies one imagines from later times. It was slower, quieter, shaped as much by the weight of order as by the glory of conquest. To rule here was to balance, to stand between gods and people, between chaos and harmony, between the unpredictable waters of the rivers and the steady rhythm of life. Imagine a king seated in a shaded courtyard. There is warm, cicadas hum. The faint scent of oil and incense drifts by. He does not sit upon a golden throne in splendor, but upon a carved wooden chair, beneath the gaze of clay walls painted with simple patterns. Around him gather scribes, priests, and advisors, their tablets stacked neatly, their stylus is poised. He listens more than he speaks, for his task is not to command endlessly, but to judge, to weigh, to decide. A farmer disputes with his neighbor over a canal. A merchant brings complaint of an unpaid debt. A widow asks for the return of land promised to her. Each matter is small, yet together they form the fabric of the city. To rule is to hold that fabric gently but firmly, so it does not unravel. The idea of kingship in Mesopotamia was deeply tied to the gods. A king was not a god himself, but he ruled by divine favor. He was chosen, it was believed, to bring order where chaos threatened, to keep justice alive, to ensure that temples were maintained and rituals performed. His role was not to shine in isolation, but to serve as the visible thread binding heaven and earth. Without him, the gods might withdraw their blessing, the rivers might turn against the land, the harvest might fail. Kingship, then, was less about pride and more about duty, a heavy, quiet burden carried across generations. We often think of kings as conquerors, their legacies written in battles. But Mesopotamian kings were remembered just as much for what they built, for what they inscribed into clay, for the laws they shaped. Hammurabi, king of Babylon, did not only extend his rule across the land, he set forth a code of laws, carved into stone, placed where all could see, to bring about the rule of righteousness. The inscription begins, to protect the weak from the strong. His laws were not perfect, not gentle in every detail, but they carried within them the quiet hope of order, the wish that life might unfold not only by chance, but by guidance. Picture the great stele of Hammurabi's code, a tall block of basalt, its surface carved with lines upon lines of cuneiform. At its top, the king is shown standing before Shamash, the sun god of justice, who extends to him the rod and ring of authority. Beneath this image flow the words laws governing trade, marriage, theft, injury, inheritance. Each law is a thread, each thread woven into a fabric meant to hold society together. The stele stands silently, yet it speaks across time. It tells us that here, in Mesopotamia, people believed that justice could be shaped, that order could be made visible, that life could be steadied by words carved into stone. The laws were many detailed, often harsh by our measure, yet they reflect a world trying to find balance. If a man damaged another's field, he must pay in grain. If a builder's house collapsed, he bore responsibility. If an injury was done, the principle of an eye for an eye was invoked not out of cruelty, but as a way to ensure that punishment matched offense, that justice was neither too light nor too heavy. These laws were not abstractions, they were part of daily life. A farmer, a merchant, a craftsman all lived under their shadow, all found in them a measure of predictability. But kingship was not only laws, it was also ritual. In New Year festivals, kings humbled themselves before the gods, confessing their unworthiness, renewing their bonds with heaven. They participated in processions, leading statues of gods through city streets, ensuring that people and deities remained bound together. To rule was to serve in ceremony, to be seen not only as master, but as mediator. The quiet dignity of these rituals shaped kingship as much as armies or decrees. Think of a city such as Uruk or Babylon during one of these festivals. The streets are lined with people, their voice is low in reverence. Priests carry statues on wooden platforms, draped in cloth adorned with garlands. The king walks beside them, head bowed, his crown gleaming softly in the sunlight. Drums beat slowly, flutes play gentle melodies, incense drifts upward. It is not a spectacle of noise, but of presence. The people feel their lives woven into the larger rhythm of city, temple, and heaven. The king is not distant, but within that rhythm, part of it, bound by it. Kings also built. They commissioned walls to encircle cities, canals to carry water, temples to rise in clay. Each project was an extension of kingship, a way of shaping the land into order. The bricks bore their names, pressed before firing, ensuring that memory lingered. Yet even in these works, the sense is not one of arrogance, but of service. The walls protected the people, the canals fed the fields, the temples nourished the gods. Kingship was not eternal glory, but practical endurance, sustained one brick at a time, one canal at a time. At night, when the city grew quiet, the king too sat in silence. The stars stretched endlessly above Mesopotamia, their patterns watched carefully by priests, their movements read as signs of divine will. The king listened to such counsel, considered omens, weighed dreams. He did not rule by force alone, but by interpretation, by seeking the balance between human action and divine intention. To rule here was not to impose endlessly, but to listen to gods, to priests, to people, to rivers. The fragility of kingship was always present. Empires rose and fell. Kings were remembered and forgotten. Yet the idea of kingship endured the belief that there must be one who stood between chaos and harmony, one who bore the weight of order. That endurance was not loud. It was quiet, like the steady turning of seasons, like the slow flow of canals. It was not the noise of conquest, but the silence of responsibility. And so, Mesopotamian kingship teaches us something gentle. Civilization does not rest only upon victories, nor upon monuments of stone. It rests upon the quiet weight of justice, upon the slow weaving of laws, upon the balance kept by rulers who listened more than they shouted. The kings are gone, their palaces in ruins, their laws broken into fragments. Yet the idea they carried the dream of order shaped by words, of balance upheld by duty, still whispers softly across time. Civilization does not grow in isolation. It breathes through exchange, through the gentle movement of goods, ideas, and people. Mesopotamia, though rich in silt and fertile with grain, lacked much that life desired: stone for building, timber for beams, metals for tools. Its cities rose from clay, but clay alone could not sustain them, and so the people of the rivers turned to trade, with boats upon the waters, with caravans across deserts, with markets beneath the sun. They wove themselves into a web of quiet exchange that stretched far beyond the plains of Tigris and Euphrates. Imagine the banks of the Euphrates on a morning before the heat has risen. The river flows slowly, its surface glinting like soft bronze beneath the first light. Along the shore, wooden boats rest, their hulls coated with bitumen to keep out the water. Men load baskets of grain, jars of oil, bundles of reeds. The air carries the smell of earth and tar, mingled with the sweet scent of dates. Children watch as traders push the boats gently into the current, their long poles dipping into the water, guiding the vessels out onto the river's flow. The movement is slow, unhurried, steady. It is the pace of trade, the quiet rhythm of exchange. The rivers were the first highways of Mesopotamia. Boats made of reeds, lashed together and sealed with bitumen, floated easily upon the waters. Later came sturdy vessels of wood, able to carry heavier loads. Downstream, they carried grain, oil, and wore the fruits of the land between rivers. Upstream, they returned with timber from distant mountains, with copper from the deserts, with lapis lazuli from lands far to the east. Each journey was not only an exchange of goods, but an extension of connection. The rivers carried not only boats, but ties between peoples. Picture a boat arriving in the harbor of yore. Its hull is heavy with goods, its crew weary from the journey. They unload their cargo, gleaming copper ingots, precious stones wrapped in cloth, timber cut into beams. The merchants record each item on clay tablets, their styluses pressing carefully into damp surfaces. Nearby, scribes tally the grain and oil to be exchanged in return. The market hums with low voices, bargaining carried out not in shouts, but in measured tones, as if trade itself were a form of ritual. The goods of Mesopotamia were humble yet precious. Barley was the foundation grain that fed the people, brewed into beer, measured into rations. Wool too was vital, spun into cloth, woven into garments, traded across lands. Oil, pressed from sesame seeds, was another treasure, used in cooking, in lamps, in offerings. These goods, born of the soil and the river, became currency. They were weighed, measured, and exchanged, their value inscribed in clay. Trade, then, was not merely material, but symbolic. It carried the rhythm of life itself. Far beyond the rivers, caravans crossed deserts. Donkeys bore panniers of goods, moving step by slow step across sand and stone. Traders walked beside them, guiding the animals with quiet patience, their sandals kicking up small clouds of dust. Nights were spent in camps, fires burning softly, stars stretching endlessly overhead. Around the flames, stories were told of distant cities, of strange goods, of foreign gods. Caravans were not only lines of trade, but lines of memory, carrying knowledge as much as merchandise. Think of a merchant returning from such a journey. His caravan enters the gates of Babylon, donkeys laden with goods. The people gather to watch, children pointing at the bright blue stones of lapis lazuli, at the gleam of tin and copper. The merchant bows before the temple, offering part of his profit to the gods, before turning to the market to sell the rest. His journey has taken months, perhaps years, yet he returns not empty, But woven more deeply into the life of his city, trade shaped not only wealth but culture. From distant lands came not only goods but ideas, new techniques of metalwork, new stories, new gods whose names joined the pantheon. Mesopotamia, though rooted between the rivers, reached outward through trade, stretching its influence across mountains and deserts. It was never still. Like the rivers themselves, it flowed, carrying with it connections that reached far beyond its banks. Markets were places of this quiet mingling. Picture a bazaar beneath the shade of palm trees, stalls of clay jars, baskets of dates, rolls of cloth line the street. Merchants sit cross-legged, their goods spread before them, their voices soft as they bargain. A woman examines a jar of oil, dipping her finger to test its quality. A craftsman inspects a piece of metal, weighing it in his hand. Children weave between the stalls, laughter rising and falling. It is not a place of noise, but of hum, of low tones and steady rhythms. Trade here is not spectacle, but life unfolding. Even the temple played its role in trade. As the heart of the city, it stored grain, oversaw exchanges, lent goods, and recorded debts. A farmer might borrow seed in spring, to be repaid after harvest. A merchant might receive oil for his journey, to be returned with profit. The temple was both sacred and economic, both divine and practical. Within its walls, the act of exchange became ritual, another form of devotion, another rhythm binding people together. At night, when the markets closed and the boats rested, trade did not vanish. In small courtyards, families shared bread baked. From grain grown, harvested, and traded, oil lamps flickered, their light reflecting upon jars of oil, baskets of dates, rolls of cloth. Even in stillness, trade remained, for it was woven into every meal, every garment, every lamp. It was not loud, but constant, not sudden, but enduring. The beauty of Mesopotamian trade lies not in wealth alone, but in its quiet persistence. It was the slow rhythm of boats upon water, the steady tread of donkeys across deserts, the patient marks of scribes upon clay. It was not the rush of conquest, but the hum of exchange. Through trade, Mesopotamia connected itself to the wider world, and in doing so, ensured that its memory would endure. And so, we can see Mesopotamian trade as a kind of river itself, a river of goods and ideas, flowing outward and inward, never still, always moving. Its current was slow, its voice quiet, but it carried with it the life of civilizations. Civilization does not rise upon stone alone. It grows first from soil, from water, from seeds pressed into earth. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of cities, agriculture was the quiet heartbeat that sustained life. It was not a sudden triumph, not a loud discovery, but a steady rhythm repeated across generations. Floods came and went, seasons turned, and people learned slowly, patiently, to guide the waters, to shape the land, to coax food from the fertile plain. The story of Mesopotamia is the story of fields, canals, and harvests, of patient hands bent toward the earth. Imagine dawn along the Euphrates. The sky is pale, the air cool, the river glistens with the first touch of light. On the banks, reeds sway softly, their stalks whispering as wind moves through them. Farmers stir from their sleep. They step into sandals, lift their tools wooden, plows, baskets, sickles of sharpened flint or bronze. Children yawn, rubbing their eyes as goats bleat nearby. Slowly, the village awakens, not with haste, but with quiet determination. Today, like yesterday, like countless days before, the work of the fields will continue. The land of Mesopotamia was both gift and challenge. The rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, brought fertile silt, renewing the soil with each flood. Yet the floods were unpredictable, sometimes too strong, sometimes absent. Without guidance, the rivers could destroy as easily as they could sustain, and so the people learned to dig canals, to shape embankments, to guide water gently into the fields. Irrigation was the great act of Mesopotamian patience. It required no single hero, no sudden leap, but generations of steady labor digging, maintaining, repairing. The canals became lifelines, carrying the rivers into the heart of the land, ensuring that barley and wheat could grow even in dry seasons. Picture a canal under the hot sun. Its banks are lined with mud, reinforced with reeds. Water flows slowly, shimmering in the light. Along its edge, a farmer kneels, diverting a small stream into his plot with a simple gate of wood. The soil darkens as water spreads across it, soaking into furrows where seeds have been sown. A child follows behind, scattering grain from a woven basket, laughing as birds swoop to snatch a few kernels. The air smells of wet earth, of growing life. This is the quiet magic of irrigation, not dramatic, not loud, but steady, life-giving, enduring. The crops themselves were humble but essential. Barley was the foundation, tolerant of salt in the soil, resilient in uncertain waters. Wheat, too, grew in abundance, though it demanded care. From these grains came bread, the daily food, and beer, the daily drink. Fields of barley stretched in golden waves beneath the sun, their heads bending softly in the wind. Dates grew on tall palms, their fruit gathered carefully, their trunks climbing toward the sky like sentinels. Lentils, chickpeas, onions, and garlic added their quiet presence to meals. Sesame, pressed into oil, became another treasure. Together, these foods sustained life not in luxury, but in constancy. Harvest time was a season of both labor and celebration. Picture a field in late summer, golden and ready. Men and women move slowly through the stalks, their sickles cutting in gentle arcs. The sound is soft, rhythmic, swish, swish, swish. Children gather the cut stalks, bundling them together. Oxen pull carts laden with sheaves, their hooves pressing into the soil. The sun is hot, the work unending, yet there is joy in the air. For each bundle gathered, each stalk cut, is security for the months ahead. At night, when the labor is done, the village gathers to eat, to drink beer brewed from barley, to rest beneath the stars. The harvest is not only survival, it is gratitude, a rhythm older than cities themselves. The surplus of agriculture gave birth to many firsts. With more grain than a family could eat came storage. With storage came redistribution. With redistribution came writing, as scribes marked tallies of grain, jars of oil, flocks of sheep. The first clay tablets recorded not poetry, but barley and sheep, oil and beer. Civilization grew not from sudden brilliance, but from the quiet need to remember who owed what, who received what, who labored where. From the humble furrows of fields came the first marks of cuneiform. Agriculture also wove people into community. To dig a canal required many hands. To maintain it, constant care. One farmer alone could not guide the river, but together, villages carved waterways that turned deserts into fields. This cooperation was not dramatic but essential. It bound people together, not in conquest, but in labor, in shared dependence. Upon the river, each canal was not only a work of engineering but of trust, a silent agreement that survival came not through isolation but through unity. Think of a summer evening along a canal. Families gather at its edge, their feet dangling. In the cool water, the day's work is done. Bread is shared, dipped in oil. Beer is poured into clay cups, passed from hand to hand. The children play, splashing in the shallows. The elders speak softly, recalling floods of past years, droughts endured, canals repaired. The water flows quietly beside them, carrying its gift into the fields. This is not grandeur, but life, not conquest, but endurance. It is the quiet rhythm upon which all else rests. Even the gods of Mesopotamia reflected agriculture's importance. Enki, the god of water and wisdom, was praised for bringing irrigation. Ninurta, the god of farming, guarded the fields. Ninkasi, goddess of beer, blessed the brewing that turned barley into drink. The myths themselves are full of seeds, floods, harvests. In them, agriculture was not simply labor, but divine partnership, a rhythm shared between human and God. Earth and heaven, the fragility of this system was always felt. Too much water, and fields drowned. Too little, and they withered. Swords built up in the soil, reducing yields. Each generation faced these challenges, adapting, adjusting, persisting. Agriculture was not secure, but it was constant. And perhaps it is this constancy, fragile yet enduring, that makes it so beautiful. The people of Mesopotamia did not control their world. They guided it gently, patiently, in partnership with land and water. At night, when the fields lay quiet, the stars glittered above them. Farmers lay upon rooftops, resting after long days, the scent of cut grain still in the air. They looked upward, tracing constellations that priests would later inscribe, seeking patterns in the sky as they had in the soil. Just as canals brought order to water, so did constellations bring order to heavens. Both were reflections of the same quiet yearning to find rhythm in chaos, to find harmony in the vastness of life. The beauty of Mesopotamian agriculture lies not in spectacle, but in repetition. It was the slow turning of seasons, the steady growth of barley, the patient digging of canals. It was the rhythm of footsteps across fields, of sickles moving through stalks, of children laughing beside irrigation ditches. It was civilization's foundation, built not in stone but in soil, not in conquest but in cultivation. And though the fields have long since turned to dust, their memory endures, whispering that civilization itself is a harvest, gathered patiently, season after season, by hands that worked quietly beneath the sun. When we think of the first civilizations, we often imagine towering walls, temples rising above cities, or kings issuing commands. Yet the true heartbeat of Mesopotamia's endurance lies not in stone or conquest, but in something smaller, humbler, quieter, the press of a stylus into wet clay. Writing, born between the Tigris and Euphrates, was not thunderous but patient. It began not with poetry or tales of heroes, but with lists, tallies, records, whispers of memory pressed into tablets that dried in the sun. From such modest beginnings grew the vast echo of human expression. Picture a small room in a Mesopotamian city, perhaps Uruk or Ur. The walls are of clay brick, cool in the shade. The air is still, filled with the faint smell of damp earth. A low table rests in the center. Around it sit scribes, their reed styluses in hand. Before them lie small, rectangular tablets of fresh clay, smooth and waiting. The room is quiet but for the soft scratching sound of stylus upon clay. One scribe marks the delivery of grain, a basket here, a jar there. Another records the lending of sheep, the measure of oil, the repayment of barley. Each mark is simple, yet each carries weight. Each line pressed into clay holds memory, preserving what otherwise would vanish with the air. The origins of writing were practical. Villages had grown into towns, towns into cities, surpluses of grain and oil, exchanges of goods, obligations of labor. These needed to be remembered, tracked, preserved. Speech alone was not enough. Memory could falter, disputes could arise, and so symbols were shaped. At first, they were little more than pictures. A barley stalk for grain, a jar for oil, a head for livestock. Over time, these pictures became simpler, more abstract, easier to press quickly into clay. The system grew into cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script, named for the stylus's cut, pressed at angles into the surface of tablets. Imagine the hand of a scribe. He holds a reed stylus cut to a sharp edge. With practiced care, he presses its tip into the clay at an angle, leaving a wedge. Another wedge follows, then another, the pattern forming a symbol. Slowly, the tablet fills with lines and marks, each arranged in order, each carrying meaning. What seems to us a scattering of tiny strokes was, to them, a voice captured, a memory preserved. The scribe pauses, examines his work, then lays the tablet aside to dry in the sun. Hours later, it hardens, becoming as permanent as stone. The words are now fixed, steady, ready to endure. Writing was not the tool of everyone. It belonged first to scribes, a class trained in the temple schools. To become a scribe was no small task. Students practiced for years, pressing styluses into clay, repeating signs again and again until the shapes became second nature. Tablets have been found that bear only the repeated lines of practice, signs written over and over, columns of wedges, exercises in patience. It was a craft of endurance, not of haste. Those who mastered it carried great importance, for they preserved the memory of their people. The first texts were not tales but tellers. A farmer's debt, a temple's offerings, a merchant's contract, these were the earliest words. And yet, from these beginnings, writing slowly grew beyond numbers. Hymns to gods were pressed into clay, prayers that rose not in the air but through marks on tablets. Kings recorded their victories, their laws, their decrees. Myths were written, first as fragments, then as stories of gods and heroes, of creation and flood. The quiet marks of memory expanded, carrying not only trade but imagination. Among the most famous of these early works is the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale born of clay tablets. Though written long after the first marks, it grew from the same practice, the same stylus, the same patient pressing of wedges into clay. Imagine a scribe seated in the flickering light of a lamp, recording the adventures of the king of Uruk, his friendship with Enkidu, his grief, his search for immortality. Each line, pressed with care, carried the weight of human longing. It is a remarkable thought that the same script that once marked barley deliveries could also preserve the ache of a king's heart. Yet even the simplest tablets hold beauty. Consider a contract for a marriage, names pressed into clay, a record of dowry, a promise of union, or a receipt for sheep, counted carefully and exchanged. These are not grand, but they are enduring. They are fragments of life, ordinary and humble, yet preserved across millennia. To hold such a tablet today is to feel the presence of voices long gone, their whispers carried forward through clay. The act of writing itself carried ritual. Clay was gathered from the riverbanks, kneaded with water until smooth. It was shaped into tablets, flat and ready. The scribe dipped his reed stylus into his hand, pressed it carefully into the surface, stroke after stroke. When the text was finished, the tablet might be dried in the sun or baked in a kiln for permanence. Some tablets were sealed within clay envelopes, impressed with cylinder seals that bore the marks of families, merchants, or officials. The seal rolled across the surface, leaving its intricate design an image of gods, animals, or symbols testifying to authenticity. The entire process was one of care, of patience, of quiet attention, and so writing was not merely a tool but a way of shaping memory. It gave weight to words, permanence to agreements, endurance to stories. What was once fleeting became lasting. What was once spoken into air became pressed into clay, able to cross generations. Without writing, Mesopotamia's rhythms might have faded. With it, they endured, carried not only in memory, but in record night. Imagine a scribe finishing his work. The day's tablets are laid upon a shelf, drying slowly. The room is dark, but for the glow of a small oil lamp. Outside, the city is quiet, the sound of the river faint in the distance. The scribe sits back, his hands dusty with clay, his reed stylus resting beside him. He does not think of history, nor of legacy. He has only recorded what was needed: grain counted, sheep tallied, contracts remembered, and yet, in his patient labor, he has preserved a voice that will echo long after he is gone. The story of Mesopotamian writing is not one of sudden brilliance, but of slow unfolding. It is the story of countless scribes pressing countless wedges into countless tablets. It is the story of clay gathered, shaped, marked, dried. It is the story of memory made durable, and in its quiet persistence lies its beauty. Writing was the river of thought, flowing not loudly but steadily, carrying with it the voices of a people who sought not only to live, but to remember. Even now, when fragments of these tablets lie in museums, their marks faint but visible, one can feel the hush of their presence. They are not loud, not dramatic, not filled with color. They are small, simple, quiet, and yet, in their silence, they carry centuries. They whisper of fields and trade, of gods and kings, of love and grief. They remind us that civilization is not built only with stone, but with memory, with the gentle press of a reed into clay. Civilization is not only the story of fields and water, but also of the spaces where people lifted their eyes upward. Among the flat plains of Mesopotamia, where the horizon stretched wide and endless, people dreamed of building mountains, not mountains of stone, but of clay, not born from the earth's upheaval, but raised by hands, brick by brick, carrying prayers higher toward the sky. These were the temples and ziggurats, the quiet stairways between the world of men and the realm of gods. Imagine the land between rivers, flat, fertile, without natural peaks. Against that horizon, the ziggurat rises, a great stepped pyramid, its layers stacked one upon the other, each smaller as it climbs. It is not smooth like the pyramids of Egypt, but terraced, with stairways rising to the summit. From afar, it looks like a mountain placed gently upon the plain. From within the city, it dominates the view, the center around which all else turns. The bricks were made of earth itself. Clay was dug from the riverbanks, kneaded with water, mixed with straw, molded by hand. The bricks were left to dry in the sun. Thousands upon thousands of them, shaped and hardened, were lifted into place, each one carried by laborers, placed carefully beside another, forming walls and platforms that climbed toward heaven. Some bricks were fired in kilns, made stronger, and inscribed with the names of kings who ordered the construction. Even now, in ruins, those names remain, faint marks pressed into clay, whispers from rulers who sought to touch the divine. Picture the work, lines of workers carrying baskets of bricks, the sound of footsteps upon wooden scaffolds, the rhythm of chanting as each load is lifted. The sun beats down upon their backs, yet they move in quiet persistence. Priests walk among them, offering encouragement, prayers to the gods for strength and success. Slowly, patiently, the ziggurat rises, layer upon layer, a mountain made not by nature, but by endurance. At its summit rests a temple, small compared to the structure below, yet sacred beyond measure. Here the god is thought to dwell, not in statue, alone, but in presence. For each city had its god, its divine protector. In Uruk, in Nana, goddess of love and war. In Nana, the moon god. In Babylon, Marduk, the mighty Lord. The temple was their home, the place where earth and heaven met. Priests ascended daily, carrying offerings, bread baked fresh, jars of beer, fruits and meats. The smoke of incense rose into the sky, drifting softly upon the breeze. To the people below, the ziggurat was not merely stone and clay, it was the axis of their world. Life revolved around it. Festivals began there, processions wound through its stairways, prayers were spoken at its gates. At night, when the stars glittered above, the silhouette of the ziggurat loomed dark against the sky, a mountain of clay mirroring the constellations. Perhaps the people believed that by building upward, they could draw nearer to the stars, nearer to the gods who guided their fates. Step closer and picture the courtyard surrounding the ziggurat. Pilgrims enter with offerings in hand, baskets of grain, doves in cages, jars of oil. Musicians play softly, lyres plucked, flutes sighing in the breeze. Priests chant hymns, their voices rising and falling in gentle cadence. The temple bells ring, their tones carrying across the city. The air is thick with the scent of incense, of smoke mingling with the dust of sun-baked earth. For those who enter, it is not merely ritual, but communion, a joining of daily life with eternal presence. Inside the temple, the air is hushed. Walls painted with sacred images glow in lamplight. A statue of the god stands at the center, clothed in fine garments, adorned with jewels, attended daily by priests. The god is treated as a living being, washed, fed, anointed. Songs are sung in reverence, prayers whispered in hope. To enter such a space was to step out of the ordinary, to leave behind the fields and streets, and to walk gently into the presence of the divine. And yet, though grand, the ziggurat was not loud. It was not a palace of conquest, but of devotion. It was built slowly, patiently, with the same rhythm as canals dug or fields sown. It was an accumulation of quiet acts, brick-shaped, carried, placed, each action small, each gesture ordinary, yet together they formed a mountain that could touch the sky. Civilization itself is much the same, not sudden, not loud, but built of countless simple tasks repeated across generations. The ruins that remain at Ur, at Babylon, still carry the memory of these mountains of clay. Their steps are worn, their summits crumbled, yet their presence lingers. Even broken, they echo with reverence. To stand among them today is to feel the hush of time, the weight of hands long gone, the persistence of faith that shaped earth into sacred form. At night, imagine a priest climbing the stairway of the ziggurat. The city sleeps below, its streets dark, its homes quiet. Only the faint sounds of animals drift through the still air. The priest carries a small lamp, its flame flickering as he ascends step by step. At the summit, he enters the temple, lays bread upon the altar, pours oil into a vessel, whispers a prayer to the god. Alone, under the stars, he performs his quiet duty. He does not seek glory, only presence. The ziggurat stands as a bridge, a silent mountain, lifting his prayer toward heaven. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia were not only monuments to gods but reflections of humanity's longing. They tell us that even in the earliest cities, people sought connection beyond themselves, sought to reach toward the infinite. They remind us that civilization is not only about survival, but about meaning, about lifting eyes from soil to sky, about shaping earth into a form that carries prayers upward. In the silence of sleep, perhaps you can picture it, the dark outline of a ziggurat beneath the glittering stars, the soft sound of wind against its bricks, the faint glow of a temple lamp at its summit. A mountain of clay, patient and enduring, rising quietly from the plain, holding the dreams of our people between earth and heaven. In the cradle of civilization, where fields were tilled, rivers were guided, and temples rose into the sky, there came another quiet creation, the shaping of law. Mesopotamia was not only a land of bricks, reeds, and water, but also a land of rules, agreements, balances carefully drawn. For when people lived together in growing numbers, sharing walls and markets, canals and fields, disputes arise. And in order to live in harmony, a framework was needed, something steady, something remembered, something more enduring than the shifting memory of words. Thus emerged law, not as a sudden invention, but as a slow gathering of customs, judgments, and decrees. At first, disputes were settled by elders, by priests, by kings who sat beneath shaded canopies to hear the arguments of their people. A boundary stone moved, a debt unpaid, a field flooded, a marriage broken, each case required a decision, and each decision, spoken aloud, carried weight. Over time, these words were pressed into clay, written to endure. From these beginnings came codes of law, some of the earliest in human history. The most famous is the Code of Hammurabi, though it was not the first. Hammurabi, king of Babylon in the 18th century BCE, ordered his laws inscribed upon a tall stone stele, carved with wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform. At its top, an image shows the king standing before Shamash, the sun god of justice, receiving the staff and ring that symbolize authority. Below this divine scene stretch hundreds of lines of text, laws on trade, family, property, labor, and crime. Yet Hammurabi's code was only a collection of traditions that had already lived for generations, whispered by judges and scribes, passed down in clay and memory. Imagine the scene of judgment in a Mesopotamian city. A small crowd gathers beneath the shade of a tree or within the open courtyard of a temple. Two men stand before the judge, their voices raised in dispute. One claims the boundary stone of his field has been moved. The other insists it stands where it always has. The judge listens patiently, his face calm. He calls for witnesses, neighbors, perhaps who know the land. He examines the marks upon the soil, the stones that divide. Slowly, he makes his decision, speaking words that ripple through the gathering. His ruling is written down by a scribe, pressed into a clay tablet, sealed with a cylinder seal. The decision now has permanence. The matter is settled not by strength, but by order, not by force, but by words fixed in clay. Law was not abstract. It touched every part of life. It governed the price of grain and the wages of laborers. It set rules for adoption, inheritance, and marriage. It marked the penalties for theft, for injury, for fraud. It sought to balance fairness, though by our eyes, its justice often seemed severe. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, such was the principle, not of cruelty, but of measured response. To injure another was to invite equal injury. To take was to repay. The laws created a symmetry, a balance, a quiet attempt to keep peace among people whose lives pressed so closely together. Picture a tablet of law in a scribe's hands. Its surface is small, yet it carries power greater than stone walls. Within its lines are rules for how to treat debtors, how to pay shepherds, how to punish false witnesses. To read such a tablet is to enter a world where daily actions, buying, selling, marrying, farming, are all guided by the same steady framework. It is a reminder that civilization is not only about survival, but about structure, about living together in ways that seek harmony, however imperfectly. Yet law was more than punishment. It was also protection. The weak, the widow, the orphan, the poor all found mention in the laws, for rulers claimed divine duty to protect them. Hammurabi himself declared in the preface to his code that he was chosen to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and evil, that the strong may not oppress the weak. Whether perfectly fulfilled or not, the words themselves echo with intent, a reminder that civilization aspires not only to build, but to protect. The rituals of justice, too, carried symbolism. Oaths were sworn before gods, upon altars within temples. To break an oath was not only to break trust with another person, but to risk the anger of the divine. A dispute might be settled by ordeal, casting the accused into the river, believing the gods would save the innocent and condemn the guilty. Such practices, strange to us, were part of a deeper trust in balance between the seen and unseen. Law was not simply human, it was divine, a thread woven between earth and heaven dotted night. In the flickering light of lamps, scribes copied these laws into fresh clay, their styluses pressing steadily, wedge by wedge. The room was quiet but full, the faint scratching of reeds. Outside, the city murmured with its own live children playing, merchants closing stores, farmers returning from the fields. Yet within, order was being shaped, fixed into tablets that would outlast the moment, perhaps even the generation. To read such a tablet now is to hear again those whispers, those judgments, those attempts to weave peace through words. Civilization does not endure on bricks alone. It endures on memory, on order, on agreements that hold lives together. The laws of Mesopotamia may feel distant, yet their essence is familiar. To seek fairness, to prevent harm, to balance disputes, these are human needs, timeless and enduring. In Mesopotamia, they found quiet form in clay, written not to shout, but to guide. Imagine once more a city under the stars. The ziggurat looms in the distance, its summit temple glowing faintly with lamplight. The canals glimmer in the moonlight, reflecting the stillness of the night. Within a home, a father speaks to his son, teaching him the laws of the land, explaining what is permitted, what is forbidden, what is fair. The child listens, his eyelids heavy, the words blending into the lull of the evening. In this way, law, too, became a kind of lullaby, an attempt to soothe the uncertainties of life with patterns, with rules, with balance. The legacy of Mesopotamian law lingers even now. Fragments of Hammurabi's code stand in museums, their wedge-shaped marks faint but firm. They remind us that justice was not born in thunder, but in clay. That fairness, however flawed, was sought not by conquest, but by quiet words carved into permanence. They remind us that, in the long hush of history, people have always sought not only to live, but to live together, in peace as best they could. Civilization is remembered not only in bricks and laws, but also in sound. Where words may fade and monuments crumble, music lingers, carried by air, by memory, by rhythm that reaches into the heart. In Mesopotamia, among fields and rivers, cities and ziggurats, music was not a luxury, it was a companion, a thread woven through labor, worship, and rest. The quiet plains echoed with voices and instruments, with songs that softened toil, honored gods, and lulled families to sleep beneath the stars. Imagine the dawn along the banks of the Euphrates. Farmers led oxen to the fields, their sandals pressing into dew-damp earth. As they walk, one begins to hum, another joins, the tune simple and repetitive, rising and falling like the motion of plough through soil. The oxen move steadily, guided not only by rope and hand, but by the rhythm of voices. Work is softened by song, time measured not by clocks but by melody taught in the city. Music filled markets as well. Merchants sat before stores of grain, oil, and cloth, while musicians played. to attract attention, their instruments carrying bright notes into the bustle. A reed flute, carved from river cane, breathed soft melodies. A lyre, strung with gut, plucked steady patterns. A drummer tapped upon a skin-stretched frame, heartbeat of the crowd. Children clapped, women swayed, men laughed softly. The market was not loud, but alive. Its hum enriched by music, temples, too, resounded with song. Priests and priestesses sang hymns to gods, their voices rising in solemn cadences. Lyres and harps accompanied them, their strings echoing through stone courtyards. The sound was not meant for entertainment, but for devotion. Music lifted offerings upward, turning bread and oil into praise. In the hush of dawn sacrifices, in the glow of evening rituals, music bound earth to heaven, carrying words beyond their ordinary reach. Consider the instruments themselves. The lyre was beloved, a wooden frame shaped like horns or wings, strung with strings that shone in lamplight. Some were small, meant for personal song. Others were grand, gilded with gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli, adorned with figures of bulls or lions. To see such an instrument was to glimpse both craft and devotion, for music in Mesopotamia was sacred, a gift given not only to people but to gods. The flute was simpler, yet no less treasured. Made from reeds or bone, its voice was soft, breathy, like wind through grass. Shepherds carried flutes as they guided their flocks across plains, their tunes mingling with the bleating of sheep, the rustle of grass, the sigh of desert wind. In their solitude, music was both company and comfort, a reminder that even in stillness, sound can keep loneliness at bay. Drums, too, carried weight. Made of hollow wood with stretched skins, they pulsed with rhythm, steady and grounding. In festivals, they marked the steps of dancers. In temples, they echoed the heartbeat of prayers. In war, they stirred courage. Yet even in homes, small drums might be tapped gently, their sound soothing children as they drifted to sleep. The drum's voice was both deep and tender, both commanding and comforting. At night, music softened the edges of the day. Families gathered in courtyards lit by oil lamps. A mother sang to her child, her voice low and steady, weaving a lullaby older than memory. The melody spoke of gods, of rivers, of hope, of safety. The child, eyes heavy, drifted into dreams, carried by the gentle rise and fall of sound. Music here was not performance but intimacy, not spectacle but love. Festivals filled the streets with grander sound. Picture a procession moving toward a temple. Priests in white robes led the way, singers chant hymns, musicians follow with lyres, flutes, and drums. The crowd sways, clapping softly, singing along. Offerings are carried, jars of oil, baskets of dates, doves in cages. The ziggurat looms ahead, its summit glowing in the sun. The air is thick with incense, dust, and song. The city breathes together, bound by rhythm. Archaeologists have uncovered instruments buried with the dead, placed in tombs as companions for the journey beyond. In Ur, the royal lyres were found, their wooden frames preserved with gold and lapis. Their strings are long silent, yet one can almost imagine their sound a deep resonance, a gentle plucking, a song rising into the night. To bury an instrument with the dead was to believe that music, too, was eternal, needed not only in life, but in the silence beyond. The oldest written music also comes from this land. Hymns inscribed upon tablets, their notations faint but decipherable. To look upon such a tablet is to see music pressed into clay, frozen yet alive. The melodies may sound strange to us, their scales unfamiliar, yet their essence is clear, a desire to order sound, to carry emotion through time, to make the invisible audible. Picture a quiet night in Babylon. The markets are closed, the canals. Still, the stars bright overhead. From a distant courtyard, the sound of a lyre drifts into the air. Its notes rise slowly, softly, echoing against mud brick walls. A flute joins, then a voice, singing words of love, of longing, of gods and men. The city listens in silence, the song weaving through narrow alleys, blending with the hush of wind. Even in the heart of empire, life slowed, breathes, rests. Music carries its dot in the long hush of history. The music of Mesopotamia may be silent to our ears, but not to imagination. We can still hear it if we pause. The hum of farmers in the fields, the flute of shepherds on the plain, the hymns of priests. In temples, the lullabies of mothers in homes. It is not the sound of grandeur, but of gentleness, not of noise, but of persistence. Music in Mesopotamia was like the rivers themselves, steady, flowing, never absent, shaping life in ways both subtle and profound. And so, when we think of this first cradle of civilization, we should not picture only clay tablets, ziggurats, or canals. We should also imagine its soundscape, the whisper of flutes, the plucking of lyres, the beat of drums, the murmur of voices in song. These were the quiet songs of the plains, carrying meaning where words alone could not reach. Civilization, after all, is not only seen but heard. Civilization does not live only in temples or palaces, nor in codes of law carved into stone. Civilization breathes most softly in the daily patterns of ordinary people, the rhythms of morning and evening, of meals and work, of laughter in courtyards and sleep under starlight. Mesopotamia, between the rivers, was filled not only with kings and scribes, but with countless lives unfolding in steady routine. If we listen closely, we may hear their quiet footsteps, their soft conversations, their small acts repeated across generations. The humble homes of mud brick houses of Mesopotamia were built not from marble or cedar, but from earth itself. Clay was shaped into bricks, dried in the sun, and stacked into walls. Roofs were flat, made of reeds and mud, strong enough to walk upon. Courtyards lay at the heart of these homes, open spaces where light fell, where air moved, where families gathered. Picture such a home. Narrow alleys led to wooden doors. Inside, the courtyard opens, its walls plain, its floor swept smooth. A jar of water sits in one corner, a low table in another. Clay lamps hang from hooks, ready to be lit at dusk. Children run barefoot across the space, their laughter echoing. Softly, women grind grain with heavy stones, their hands moving in steady rhythm. Men return from fields or workshops, laying down tools, washing dust from their faces. The house is not grand, but it is alive. At night, families slept on mats, spread upon the ground or upon the roof when air was cool. They covered themselves with woven blankets, listening to the faint sounds of animals in the street, the distant murmur of the river. Sleep came easily, for the day had been long and filled with labor. The stars above, bright and countless, watched silently, as if guarding the dreams of those below. The daily rhythm life began with dawn. Roosters crowed, dogs barked, the city stirred awake. Farmers left early, guiding donkeys or oxen toward the fields. Bakers lit their ovens, filling streets with the warm smell of bread. Scribes carried their writing boards to schools or offices. Children followed mothers to markets, clutching baskets. Each morning was both ordinary and sacred, a fresh pattern repeating as it had for centuries. Midday brought heat. Work slowed. In courtyards, families rested, eating bread dipped in oil, dates, or lentil stew. Water was drawn from jars, poured into clay cups, passed hand to hand. Merchants haggled in shaded stores, their voices rising and falling like music. Even in the hottest hours, life continued, though gently, steadily, without haste. Evening was a time of return. Farmers came, back from fields, their sandals dusty, their faces lined by sun. Craftsmen closed their shops, sweeping away shavings and dust. Markets emptied, animals were tied, fires were lit. Families gathered in courtyards for meals. Bread was broken, stews ladled, stories told. Children played until shadows deepened, then were called inside. The city, once alive with motion, softened into quiet. Food and the gentle tablet meals of Mesopotamia were simple but steady. Bread was the heart, baked daily in clay ovens. Some loaves were flat, others round, some filled with herbs or oil. Stews of beans, lentils, onions, and garlic simmered slowly, filling courtyards with their savory scent. Dates, sweet and nourishing, were eaten fresh or dried, pressed into cakes, or fermented into wine. Barley beer was common, drunk through straws from shared jars. Imagine a family meal. Mats spread in the courtyard, bowls of stew steaming, bread broken into pieces, children dipping eagerly. A jug of beer is passed, straws placed carefully. Laughter fills the air, stories unwind. It is not a feast, but a comfort, the kind of meal that sustains body and soul alike. Festivals brought richer foods, lamb roasted, fish from rivers, fruits from orchards. Spices, though rare, were treasured, their scents carrying across streets. Sweets made with honey were offered to gods and shared with neighbors. Yet even in festival abundance, the heart of the table remained bread and dates, steady gifts of field and tree. Work and craft. Daily life was filled with work, each task small yet essential. Farmers sowed, watered, harvested. Potters shaped clay into jars and bowls, turning wheels slowly, smoothing surfaces with wet hands. Weavers sat at looms, passing threads back and forth, creating cloth of wool and flax. Metal workers hammered copper, shaped bronze, carved delicate tools and ornaments. Children, too, worked. They carried water, fetched wood, helped in fields, learned trades from their parents. Yet they also played rolling clay balls, chasing animals, splashing in canals. Their laughter carried across courtyards, reminding even the weary that life was not only labor, but joy. Scribes filled their days with writing, bent over clay tablets. They pressed wedge-shaped marks, recording contracts, letters, stories, hymns. Their rooms were filled with tablets stacked neatly, shelves of memory made from earth. They were the keepers of words, the quiet guardians of civilization's voice. Faith in daily rhythm religion was not only in temples, it was woven into daily life. Small clay figurines of gods stood in homes, placed on shelves or near doors. Offerings of bread or incense were made not only at ziggurats, but in courtyards, in quiet corners, in the hum of daily life. Each action, from planting seeds to baking bread, carried echoes of devotion. When children were sick, mothers whispered prayers to healing gods. When journeys began, fathers poured a little beer onto the ground, asking for safe return. Life was lived with the gods close at hand, not distant, but present in every moment. The quiet streets of the city walk through a Mesopotamian city in imagination. The streets are narrow, winding between mud brick walls. Donkeys bray, dogs wander, children play. Merchants call softly from stores, selling figs, dates, and oil. Potters display jars, metal workers offer tools. The air is warm, filled with dust and scents of bread, incense, and clay. At the center stands the ziggurat, its stairways rising like a mountain. Around it, temples, markets, palaces. Beyond them, homes spread in clusters, each courtyard a small world of its own. The city hums with life, not in noise, but in steady rhythm, people moving, working, speaking, singing. At night, lamps flicker in doorways, casting warm light into alleys. The streets quiet, though footsteps still pass. The moon glimmers above, reflecting in canals. The city breathes in silence, resting until dawn calls it awake again. The stillness of time when we think of Mesopotamia. It is easy to imagine only kings and wars, codes of law and towering ziggurats. But the true heart of civilization was here, in the quiet pattern of daily life, in homes of mud brick, in courtyards filled with bread and laughter, in streets where children played, in songs sung softly at night. Civilization endures not in monuments alone, but in the persistence of ordinary days. Imagine yourself drifting now into one of those homes. The air is cool, the lamps glow gently. A mother hums a lullaby, a child curls upon a mat. The stars shine. Above the flat roof, the city is quiet. The world is simple, and sleep, timeless and deep, settles softly over Mesopotamia. Civilization is never still. It grows not only in fields and cities, but also along paths that stretch outward, along rivers that flow beyond sight, along caravans that move silently across plains and deserts. Mesopotamia, though cradled between rivers, was never an island. From the earliest villages to the great empires, it breathed in goods, ideas, and stories from faraway lands. Its people walked, rode, and sailed. They carried with them not only grain and cloth, but the quiet persistence of connection. The flow of goods in Mesopotamian markets. One could find more than barley, oil, and wool. There were stones from far mountains, metals from distant lands, wood from forests beyond the desert. Each object whispered of a journey of men and women walking for days, donkeys laden with baskets, boats drifting slowly down wide rivers. Copper came from Oman and Iran, its reddish gleam bright in the workshops of smiths. Tin, rarer, travelled from the east, and when mixed with copper, it gave bronze harder, stronger, a gift that shaped tools and weapons alike. Lapis lazuli, deep blue as the night sky, was carried all the way from Afghanistan, across mountains and deserts, to adorn jewelry and statues. Cedar wood, tall and fragrant, came from Lebanon, floated down rivers as heavy logs. Each item was not merely an object but a thread, tying distant places into the fabric of Mesopotamia. Picture the market stalls of yore. Merchants sit beneath awnings, goods laid out upon woven mats. A bowl carved from alabaster gleams in the light. Beads of lapis shine with blue fire. A roll of fine cloth smells faintly of distant lands. People gather, bargaining softly, exchanging barley, silver, and goods. Children peer at strange shells. Merchants speak of faraway mountains, and their hums with quiet wonder. The caravans of the desert, but how did these treasures arrive? Not by chance. Across the deserts moved caravans, long lines of donkeys or camels, each bearing baskets, jars, and sacks. Men walked beside them, staffs in hand, their sandals covered with dust. Step by step, they crossed the silent plains, the air heavy with heat by day, cool with starlight by night. Imagine such a caravan. The sun sets, painting the desert gold and crimson. Donkeys breathe softly as they are led to water. Fires are lit, small and flickering, their smoke rising into the vast sky. Traders sit in circles, sharing bread, dried figs, and dates. They speak of prices and cities, of gods and omens, of storms and safety. Their voices are low, carried gently on the night breeze. Beyond the firelight lies silence and endless desert, the horizon filled with stars by day. The caravan moves again. Dust rises in clouds as hooves press into dry earth. The rhythm is steady, unhurried. One step, then another. A flute may sound, a song carried on the wind, easing the long hours. At times, laces appear clusters of palms, pools of water, relief to both beast and man. The journey is long but steady. Each caravan is a living thread, weaving connections across the desert. The rivers as roads, not all trade moved across sand. The rivers themselves were roads. On the Tigris and Euphrates, boats drifted slowly, their hulls filled with jars of oil, sacks of grain, baskets of dates. Some were small reed boats, woven tightly, coated with bitumen. Others were larger wooden crafts, guided with poles or simple sails. Picture a boat gliding downstream at dawn. The air is cool, mist rising from the river. Birds call from reeds. Fish leap from the water. The boat moves gently, its cargo covered with mats. The oars dip, the current pulls, and the city waits downstream, its towers faint on the horizon. The journey is not fast, but it is sure. The travel of popular trade carried not only goods, but also people. Merchants journeyed from city to city, learning languages, making friends, returning home with stories as well as wealth. Diplomats traveled with gifts, bearing messages from one ruler to another. Their journeys long, but filled with meaning. Soldiers marched along roads, guarding borders, carrying the rhythm of empire. Ordinary people traveled too. Pilgrims walked to holy temples. Families moved in search of work or land. Shepherds led flocks along seasonal paths, their footsteps following ancient routes. Travelers carried not only burdens but songs, prayers, and memories. Each step was part of a larger rhythm, a quiet migration that bound people together. The exchange of items with goods and people came ideas. Traders did not only sell metal and stone, they carried stories, myths, and ways of life. From distant lands came new gods, new ways of farming, new forms of writing, new crafts. In return, Mesopotamia shared its own gifts, cuneiform tablets, tales of Gilgamesh, the shapes of temples, the rhythms of law. Civilization spread not by conquest alone, but by the slow and steady steps of caravans. Imagine a merchant returning to Ur after months away. His donkey is laden with goods, but his mind carries stories. He tells of mountains where snow never melts, of seas vast and endless, of lands where people dress in strange cloth, where gods have other names. Around him, children listen, eyes wide. Adults nod, curious. The world grows larger through words. Even before goods are unpacked, the quiet strength of connection. What is striking in this picture is not the noise of conquest, but the persistence of connection. Mesopotamia thrived not by walls alone, but by roads, rivers, and paths. Goods moved quietly. People traveled steadily. Caravans crossed deserts without fanfare. And through these journeys, the world grew smaller, more connected, more alive. Civilization is not built in isolation. It is woven like cloth, thread by thread, connection by connection. The lapis in a necklace, the cedar in a roof, the tin in a tool, all whispered of journeys, of lives far away, of a world wider than one city, one people, one land. The night caravano. Close your eyes and imagine again the desert at night. The caravan halts, donkeys kneel, baskets lowered, fires flicker. The traders sit together, eating bread, drinking water, watching stars. Silence stretches across the plain, broken only by soft voices, the crackle of fire, the distant cry of an owl. Above, the Milky Way arcs like a river of light, flowing endlessly across the sky. The traders sleep in the sand, heads upon packs, cloaks drawn tight. Their animals rest nearby, their burdens eased for the night. In dreams, the traders may already see the markets of tomorrow, the temples rising in cities ahead, the faces of families waiting at home. Their journey continues even in silence, carried by the rhythm of stars. And so, Mesopotamian trade was not only about wealth, it was about connection. It was about roads worn by countless footsteps, rivers carrying countless boats, deserts crossed by countless caravans. It was about the quiet persistence of human movement, steady and enduring, binding the world together in ways both seen and unseen. Civilization remembers itself through words. Without words, memory fades. Without writing, voices vanish when the speaker falls silent. Mesopotamia, resting between rivers, became the first land to hold memory in marks, small wedges pressed into clay, quiet strokes that carried the weight of thought. But writing was not only invention, it was practice. It was learned, repeated, taught, passed down. In the cool rooms of mud-brick schools, by the glow of oil lamps, a craft was born. The slow, deliberate art of learning, the stillbirth of words in the beginning. Writing was not grand. It was numbers scratched into clay, tallies of sheep and jars of oil. But even the simplest marks carried power. They meant one person could speak across distance, across time. A farmer could send a record to the temple. A merchant could prove a debt. A king could decree, and his words could remain after his voice had faded. Imagine a small clay tablet, no larger than a hand. Its surface is soft, damp from water. A reed. Stylus presses wedge by wedge into it, leaving lines, triangles, impressions. The marks look plain, yet each carries meaning. They are signs of grain, signs of silver, signs of names. To us, they seem silent, but to the Mesopotamians they spoke loudly, clearly, faithfully. As centuries passed, writing stretched itself wider. It reached from numbers into words, from words into stories. It grew capable of capturing prayers, hymns, myths, laws. It grew capable of naming gods and kings, rivers and stars. Writing, once the servant of trade, became the servant of memory itself. The scribes at work with words do not press themselves into clay. Behind each tablet was a hand. Behind each hand a person. The scribes of Mesopotamia were the keepers of civilization's memory. They worked in small rooms, their mats spread on floors, their clay laid in neat piles. Their styluses were sharpened reeds, cut to wedge-shaped tips. Picture such a room. The walls are bare mud brick, the floor cool, the air heavy with the smell of wet clay. A scribe sits cross-legged, his robe gathered around him. Before him lies a tablet, still soft. He leans forward, steady, his breath slow, his eyes sharp. Each press of the reed is deliberate, no motion wasted. Around him, shelves hold rows of tablets, drying in the air, waiting to be stored. The sound of writing is not like the scratching of a pen on paper. It is softer, more rhythmic. A gentle tap, a press, a release. Over and over, the reed meets clay with patience. It is almost like a lullaby repeated, soothing, steady. The scribe works not in haste, but with the quiet persistence of someone who knows he is holding memory itself. The tablet houseware did scribes learn their art. In schools known as idubas, the tablet houses, these were the quiet nurseries of knowledge, where boys, and sometimes a rare few girls, were trained to become scribes. The training was long, demanding, but steady, filled with repetition and rhythm. Imagine a classroom in Ur, or Nippur, or Babylon. The room is narrow, its floor packed earth. Dozens of boys sit cross-legged, tablets upon their knees, reeds in hand. The teacher walks slowly among them, correcting, guiding, instructing. The boys press symbols into clay again and again, repeating the shapes until their hands ache. Their tablets are broken, smoothed, reshaped, and tried again. Mistakes are not shameful, they are part of learning, part of practice, part of patience. T. First, the boys learn lists, lists of animals, lists of plants, lists of professions. Sheep, goat, cow, barley, date, onion, farmer, potter, smith. Their tablets become libraries of life, each wedge a reminder of the world around them. Slowly, they move on to proverbs, to sayings, to small hymns. In time, they copy entire stories, their hands tracing myths of gods and kings, battles and floods. The room is filled with the sound of reeds pressing clay. Tap, press, release. Dozens of hands working together. Dozens of voices reciting aloud. The rhythm is slow, hypnotic, steady. The boys tire, but they persist. Learning is not quick. It is a long, patient journey. The teacher and the apprentice are in every school. The figure of the teacher loomed large. He was often stern, for the craft required discipline. Mistakes were corrected sharply. Laziness scolded. Yet beneath the strictness lay patience, for every scribe was once a boy struggling to form neat wedges. Picture a teacher guiding a student's hand. The boy presses to shallow, the wedge faint. The teacher steadies him, presses firmer, shows the depth, the angle, the care required. The boy nods, tries again, improves. Learning is repetition. The clay forgives mistakes, for it can be smoothed, reshaped, tried again. Not in time. Apprentices became skilled. Their hands grew steady, their eyes quick. They learned to copy without error, to compose without falter, to turn thought into marks. With ease, the transformation was slow, but certain. The boy who once trembled over lists now wrote hymns to gods, laws of kings, and stories of heroes. The weight of words. Why was this art so valued? Because words carried power. To know writing was to hold authority. Contracts, records, decrees all required scribes. Kings depended on them. Temples employed them. Merchants hired them. To be a scribe was to be respected, to live with dignity, to carry the weight of civilization in one's hand. But more than power, writing carried beauty. Through writing, voices could last beyond the moment. A prayer spoken aloud vanished in air, but pressed into clay, it endured. A story told at night faded with dawn, but written, it lived for generations. Writing gave permanence to the fleeting, form to the fragile, the silent libraries in the great cities. Tablets accumulated by the thousands. Temples stored them, palaces kept them, scribes organized them. These were the first libraries, though not like ours. There were no shelves of books, but rows of clay tablets, each marked, each remembered. Within them lay contracts, hymns, laws, letters, and stories. The libraries of Mesopotamia were quiet treasuries of memory, heavy not with jewels but with words. Picture such a room. Rows of baskets filled with tablets line the walls. Dust hangs in the air. Sunlight slants through narrow windows. A scribe walks slowly, choosing a tablet, reading its wedges with careful eyes. The room is still, save for the faint hum of insects and the occasional sound of a tablet being shifted. It is not a place of noise, but of silence, a silence filled with voices waiting patiently to be heard. The whisper of eternity on the tablets were myths, the most famous being the Epic of Gilgamesh. Imagine a scribe carefully copying those lines, his reed pressing words of heroes, of gods, of loss and longing. He may not know that his work will echo thousands of years into the future, that his wedges will carry into other tongues, other lands. He only knows the clay before him, the reed in his hand, the story flowing through his marks. The sound is soft, but the meaning is vast. Each mark whispers, "Remember me, remember us, remember this." And so, Mesopotamia taught itself to remember, not through monuments alone, not through palaces alone, but through the quiet, steady work of writing, of schooling, of learning. The lullaby of learning. No. Let us imagine a night in the tablet house. The boys have finished their lessons. Their hands are sore, their tablets stacked. The lamps glow low, filling the room with warm light. Outside, The city hums faintly, dogs bark, donkeys bray, families gather in courtyards. Inside, the room is calm, filled with the scent of clay and oil. One boy lingers, tracing a wedge into clay, repeating what he has learned. His teacher watches, silent, approving. At last, the boy sets his reed down. The room grows still. The night wraps itself around the tablet house. Sleep descends. And in dreams, the boy may see letters dancing across stars, stories written upon the heavens themselves. Learning in Mesopotamia was not loud, not swift. It was patient, quiet, steady. It was the soft craft of hands pressing clay, the gentle rhythm of repetition, the slow transformation of thought into memory. It was, and remains, one of the most enduring gifts of civilization. Civilization, like a river, needs channels. Without boundaries, water floods and destroys. With careful shaping, it nourishes and sustains. In Mesopotamia, this shaping came not only through fields and canals, but through laws, written rules that guided the flow of human life. These laws were not thunderous proclamations, but steady rhythms meant to balance chaos and order. They whispered of fairness, of responsibility, of the desire to bring peace to life's daily struggles. The earliest whispers of order before kings carved great steles, before scribes etched long lists of decrees. Justice lived in custom. Villages relied on memory, elders remembered, neighbors witnessed, families carried honor. But memory can falter, and words spoken fade. So Mesopotamia turned to writing, to clay, to permanence. The earliest laws were simple, practical, rooted in the soil of daily life. If a farmer borrowed an ox, he must return it unharmed. If a man cut down a neighbor's tree, he must replace it. If a merchant cheated, witnesses could testify. These rules were not lofty abstractions, but mirrors of life itself. They spoke of barley fields, brick houses, markets, canals. They turned the fragile fairness of spoken promises into firm marks pressed into clay. The code of your Namulon before the famous laws of Hammurabi. The city of Ur gave rise to one of the earliest known codes under the king Yornamo, written around 2100 BCE. His laws were gentle in tone, more about fines than punishment. They recognized the messiness of human life and thought to balance it with measured responses. Imagine a tablet of your Nama's code. Its wedges record rules. If a man injures another, he pays silver. If a woman is widowed, she receives care. The laws are not cruel, but practical. They are like the slow voice of a father settling disputes among children, firm, but not harsh. They remind the people that the city has a memory beyond the quarrels of the day, that justice lives not in anger, but in measured balance. The stele of Hammurabi. Then came Hammurabi, king of Babylon. Around 1750 BCE, he had his laws carved, not just into clay, but into stone. His stele rose tall, black basalt, covered in rows of cuneiform. At the top, carved in relief, Hammurabi stands before Shamash, the sun god of justice, who hands him the symbols of law. Picture this stele in the light of dawn, towering over a temple courtyard. Citizens gather to look upon it, to see not only the king's face, but the face of law itself. For carved into the stone were nearly 300 laws, detailed, precise, stretching across matters of trade, marriage, farming, theft, injury. Sub-laws are harsh, echoing the principle of an eye for an eye. If a builder makes a house that collapses and kills the owner, the builder himself may be put to death. If a man blinds another, his own eye may be taken. Yet beneath the severity lies structure, order, clarity. The laws do not shift with memory or favoritism. They stand written and changing. In their firmness lies a kind of peace, the marketplace of justice, but law is not only about kings and stone stealers. It lived daily in the marketplace, in the village, in the family. Imagine a dispute between two farmers. One claims his neighbor diverted water from a canal. They bring the matter before elders or before a local judge. Witnesses speak. Tablets are read. Fines are weighed. The farmers do not shout or fight. Instead, they bow before the order of law, and the matter is settled. In the marketplace, contracts were written for trade. A merchant lending silver to another wrote it on clay, with witnesses' names pressed beside it. If the debt was unpaid, the contract spoke louder than memory. In family matters, too, law gave balance. Marriages were written, dowries recorded, inheritances listed. The law reached into every quiet corner of life, shaping it not with force, but with consistency. The judge at dusklet, as imagine a judge in Mesopotamia. The day has been long, the sun sinking beyond the rooftops. He sits in a courtyard, people gathered around. Two men argue, their voices sharp. He listens patiently, his face calm. A scribe sits beside him, tablet in hand, ready to press words into clay. Witnesses speak, neighbors murmur. At last, the judge raises his hand. His voice is steady, his decision measured. The scribe records it. The tablet is dried, the case remembered. Justice, though slow, is done. The judge rises, weary, but with peace. He knows his work is not about power, but about keeping the threads of society from unraveling. His words tonight will still echo tomorrow, when tempers cool and disputes fade. The quiet balance law in Mesopotamia was not perfect. It favored the wealthy, the powerful, the free. Slaves had fewer rights, women less than men. Yet even within these bounds, the law sought balance. It protected widows, offered care to orphans, shielded the weak from some abuses. It was not equality as we imagine, but it was an early attempt to place limits on chaos, to shape the river of life with channels of fairness. The endurance of law. What makes these laws remarkable is not only their content, but their endurance. Tablets crumbled, cities fell, empires vanished, but the laws remained. Found again by archaeologists, read again by modern eyes, they remind us of something timeless. Human beings in every age yearn for fairness, for order, for peace in daily life. The wedges on clay, the carvings on stone, carry across thousands of years. They whisper, we too struggled. We too sought balance. We too longed for justice. Their voices are quiet but steady, flowing through time like the rivers that once gave Mesopotamia life. Night and the law now. Let us imagine Mesopotamia at night. The markets are closed. The lamps glow in courtyards. Families gather. A farmer speaks softly to his wife about a dispute with a neighbor, but he is calm. Tomorrow, he knows, the matter can be brought to the elders, to the judge, to the law. Sleep comes easier when one trusts the world has order, however imperfect. And so, under the stars, Mesopotamia rests, its laws carved in clay and stone, its people soothed by the knowledge that memory will hold them accountable, that justice will not vanish into silence. The night carries them gently into dreams, the laws like a soft lullaby of order humming beneath the stillness. Civilization begins where seeds take root. In Mesopotamia, between the slow winding of the Tigris and the Euphrates, life itself was tied to the rhythm of farming. Without the fields, there would be no cities. Without irrigation, there would be no surplus. Without the steady breath of agriculture, there would be no dawn of civilization. The story of Mesopotamia is not only temples and kings, not only writing and laws, but the soft and endless patience of farmers who bent over fields, season after season, planting, tending and harvesting. The fertile land between rivers, the very word Mesopotamia means between rivers. These two rivers, flowing from the mountains into the low plains, carried with them life-giving silt. Each spring, the waters rose, flooding the banks, spreading dark soil across the fields. This soil was rich, fertile, generous, but it came with unpredictability. The floods were not gentle or timed like those of the Nile. Some years they came too early, drowning crops. Some years they came too late, leaving the ground cracked and dry. Yet the people of Mesopotamia learned to live with the river's moods. They built canals to guide the water, dikes to restrain it, reservoirs to store it. Their landscape became not just natural but shaped, a woven fabric of fields, channels, and embankments. From the air, if one could have flown, then the land would have looked like a patchwork quilt, stitched together with ribbons of water, carefully ordered by human hands. The rhythm of seasons' life followed the seasons. In autumn, when the floods receded, fields were plowed with wooden plows pulled by oxen. Seeds of barley and wheat were pressed into the moist soil. Farmers walked behind the plow, their sandals sinking into the dark earth, their hands steady on the handle. Children scattered seed from baskets, laughing as they moved across the furrows dotting winter. The rains helped the crops grow, though farmers watched the skies anxiously. Too much rain meant rot, too little meant failure. They weeded the fields, repaired canals, and tended flocks. The days were cool, the nights cold, but life pulsed gently with work. In spring, the crops ripened. Barley, the most important grain, stood tall, golden under the sun. Farmers cut it with sickles, gathering it into bundles. The grain was threshed, winnowed, stored in clay jars. Families celebrated with festivals, offering thanks to the gods who watched over fields and harvests. By summer, the land grew dry, the sun unrelenting. Canals carried precious water to the fields. Without them, the earth would crack and harden. The crops would wither. The hum of irrigation was the hum of life itself, the quiet work of irrigation. Imagine a farmer walking along the edge of a canal. At dawn, the water glimmers in the first light, flowing steadily. He checks the embankments, smoothing cracks with his hands, strengthening the walls with clay. He adjusts the gates, letting water into his fields. The sound is gentle, the splash of water, the whisper of reeds swaying, the murmur of the river beyond. Irrigation was not the work of one man alone. Villages worked together. Families gathered to dig new channels, to clear silt from old ones, to repair dikes after floods. Children carried baskets of mud. Women smoothed walls. Men wielded shovels. The work was heavy, but done in rhythm, in song, in companionship. It was a kind of community heartbeat, binding people together. Without irrigation, the land would return to desert. With it, Mesopotamia became a cradle of abundance. Surplus grain fed not just farmers, but craftsmen, priests, scribes, kings. Irrigation watered not just fields, but civilization itself. The farmer's daylight as follow a farmer through his day. He rises before dawn, the stars still bright above. The air is cool, carrying the faint smell of wet soil. He steps from his mud brick house, stretches, and listens to the distant bray of donkeys. His wife prepares a small meal: bread, dates, a jug of water. He eats quietly, then sets out to the fields to tee the canal. He lifts the gate, watching the water trickle, then flow into the furrows. He bends to touch the soil, feeling its dampness. Satisfied, he begins to weed, pulling unwanted shoots, tossing them aside. The sun rises, the light soft at first, then brighter, warmer. By midday, the work is hard. Sweat beads on his brow. His robe clings to his skin. He pauses beneath a palm, drinks from his jug, wipes his face. Around him, The fields hum with live birds darting, insects buzzing, water flowing. He smiles, weary but content as evening comes. He gathers his tools, closes the canal gate, and walks home. The air cools, the sky glows with soft orange. His children run to meet him, their laughter bright. At night, he sits with his family in the courtyard, eating bread and stew, watching the stars. Sleep comes easily, for the day has been full. The gods of the field's agriculture was not only work but worship. The gods were seen in every drop of water, every stalk of grain. In Lil, the great god of air, was prayed to for fertile winds. El, god of water, was honored for the flow of rivers. Ninhursag, the mother goddess, was invoked for the bounty of the earth. Temples rose at the edges of fields, their altars marked with offerings. Loaves of bread, jars of beer, baskets of dates. Farmers bowed, murmuring prayers for good harvests. They did not see their labor as separate from the divine. To plant was to trust the gods. To harvest was to thank them. To build canals was to serve both people and heaven. The breath of surplus was the quiet miracle of agriculture. With more grain than a family needed, some could be stored, traded, shared. Surplus freed hands from fields, allowed potters to mold clay, smiths to shape bronze, scribes to press tablets. Surplus filled temple granaries, fed armies, built palaces. Without surplus, Mesopotamia would have remained villages. With it, cities grew, towers rose, civilizations blossomed. The endless patience of fields do not hurry. Crops grew slowly, silently, in their own time. Farmers wait, watching skies, tending soil. The rhythm is long, stretching across months, across generations. A grandfather plows, a father sows, a son harvests. Life flows like water in canals, steady, patient, unhurried. Civilization may remember its kings and wars, but beneath it all, the true foundation is this patience, the bending of backs in fields, the guiding of water through ditches, the pressing of seeds into soil. It is the quiet persistence of countless hands that built the dawn of humanity. Night in the fields now, imagine night falling across Mesopotamia's plains. The fields lie dark, the canals glimmer under starlight. A farmer sits on the edge of his field, listening to frogs croak, to water whisper. His children sleep nearby. His wife hums softly as she grinds grain for tomorrow's bread. The air is still. The stars' infinite dot. In that stillness lies the heart of Mesopotamia, not in its wars or palaces, but in the quiet breath of its fields, the endless rhythm of its agriculture, a rhythm so gentle, so steady, it feels like the pulse of the earth itself. Civilizations do not grow alone. They stretch outward, reaching for connection, seeking what they lack, offering what they have. In Mesopotamia, the hum of trade was as constant as the flow of rivers. Markets filled with voices, roads echoed. With caravans, riverboats drifted under the sun. It was not only grain that sustained the people, but the steady exchange of goods, ideas, and dreams. The marketplace adorned Imogeny walking through the gates of a Mesopotamian city at first light. The sky is pale, touched with the soft pink of morning. The air is cool, carrying the smell of clay and dust, of bread baking in ovens, of animals stirring in pens. Ahead lies the marketplace, a wide open square, lined with stalls shaded by cloth, alive already with quiet preparations. Merchants lay out jars of oil, baskets of dates, bundles of reeds. Potters arrange their wares, bowls, cups, lamps, each one smooth and red from the kiln. Weavers fold cloth dyed in soft colors, the patterns intricate, patient. Shepherds arrive with sheep and goats, their bells tinkling softly. Fishermen spread their catch on mats, the scales of the fish still glistening in the early light. The voices rise, not yet loud, but steady. Greetings exchanged, prices whispered, deals struck with nods. A child clutches a father's robe, wide-eyed at the abundance. A scribe walks among the stalls, carrying a clay tablet and stylus, ready to record larger trades. The air is filled with the soft murmur of exchange, the gentle heartbeat of a city awakening. The flow of goods trade in Mesopotamia was more than daily markets. It stretched far beyond the city walls, into lands near and distant. From the rivers came fish and reeds. From nearby fields came barley and wheat. From groves came dates and figs. But the land lacked certain treasures, and so merchants reached outward. From the mountains to the north came timber and stone. From the deserts came copper, tin, and lapis lazuli, blue as the night sky. From the east came spices, wool, precious stones. From the south, across the Persian Gulf, came shells and pearls, ivory and exotic woods. Caravans of donkeys wound through deserts, their packs heavy. Boats floated down rivers, their sails catching wind, their cargo piled high. Imagine standing by the quay as a boat unloads. Men carry jars of oil, baskets of grain, crates of pottery, rolling them onto carts. Others load wool, cloth, and metal for journeys upstream. The river is alive with voices, splashes, the creak of ropes, the flap of sails. The trade flows, unhurried but unending. Like the rivers themselves, the merchant's journey let us follow. A merchant on his path, he rises before dawn, tying his rope carefully, adjusting the leather strap of his satchel. His donkeys wait, baskets laden with jars of oil, bundles of wool, small carved goods. He sets out through the city gates, the air cool, stars still faintly visible. The road stretches before him dusty, endless, dotted with caravans moving slowly. He joins them, greeting fellow merchants, sharing news. The pace is steady, measured. The donkeys plodding patiently. By day, the sun rises high, the heat pressing down, the road shimmering. By night, they camp under stars, fires flickering, voices low. Stories are told, bread is shared, jars of beer passed around. Weeks later, he arrives at a distant town. He enters its market, sets out his goods, watches as strangers examine them with careful eyes. He trades oil for copper, wool for lapis, clay goods for ivory. When his baskets are full again with new treasures, he begins the long road home. It is not a life of speed, but of rhythm, slow journeys, patient exchanges, trust built through repetition. The merchant carries not only goods, but whispers of distant lands, fragments of foreign tongues, glimpses of other gods. He is both trader and storyteller, bringing back not just wealth but knowledge. The role of the scribe trade demanded memory, and memory demanded writing. Merchants often brought scribes with them or hired them at markets to record contracts. Imagine a man selling a large shipment of grain. The scribe kneels beside him, clay tablet ready. He inscribes the details, the weight of the grain, the price agreed, the names of witnesses. The clay is dried, hardened, kept safe. If disputes arise, the tablet speaks with authority. In this way, trade gave writing new life. What began as counting sheep or jars grew into contracts, agreements, promises. Writing became the silent partner of trade, ensuring trust, preserving fairness. The soft marks in clay carried the weight of entire journeys, entire markets. The murmur of market suitors pause again in the heart of the market. By midday, the square is full. The voices rise, a chorus of bargaining, laughter, debate. Musicians play flutes in the corner, their tunes winding through the air. Children chase each other between stalls, weaving through crowds. Women gather, comparing cloth, examining jewelry. Men lean close, whispering deals. The air is thick with scents, roasted bread, sweet dates, smoked fish, crushed herbs. Animals bray and bleat, their sounds mingling with human voices. Dust rises, golden in the sun. Yet despite the noise, there is calm. The market is not chaos, but rhythm. Each sound, each motion, fits into a larger hum, a steady heartbeat dotted at dusk. The crowd thins. Merchants pack their goods, counting their earnings, thanking the gods. The square empties slowly. The light softens, the voices fade. By night, the market is silent, only shadows and stars above. Yet tomorrow it will hum again, unhurried, unbroken. The gentle web of connection trade connected Mesopotamia to lands far and near. But it also connected people to each other, weaving a gentle web of relationships. A farmer knew the potter who made his jars. The potter knew the weaver who made his cloth. The weaver knew the shepherd who sold wool. Each life depended on others, each thread woven into a larger tapestry. The kings may have claimed glory. The temples may have risen tall, but beneath it all, it was this quiet exchange, this daily murmur of markets that sustained civilization. Without trade, there would be no bronze tools, no fine cloth, no temple ornaments. Without trade, there would be no surplus to store, no goods to carry, no wealth to share. Trade was the soft murmur beneath Mesopotamia's grandeur, the unending rhythm that kept the city's heart beating. Night and the merchant's rest no. Let us imagine the merchant at night, after a long day in the market. He sits in the courtyard of his home, the air warm, the stars bright. His goods are stored, his donkeys resting. His children sit beside him, asking about his journey. He tells them of mountains, of rivers, of strange foods and distant people. His voice is calm, steady, carrying them into dreams. For trade was not only about wealth, it was about connection, about stories, about the gentle weaving of human lives. And in this way, it was as essential as water, as enduring as the rivers that cradled Mesopotamia. Every civilization rests on stories. Behind every city wall, beneath every temple stone, beyond every canal, there are whispers of the divine. In Mesopotamia, the people lived not only between rivers, but also between gods. To them, every drop of rain, every stalk of barley, every turn of the sun was touched by unseen hands. Their myths, their prayers, their rituals were not noise, but quiet songs woven into the rhythm of daily life. Religion was not separate, it was the air, the soil, the water, the sacred landscape. In Mesopotamia, land itself seemed to breathe with sacred meaning. The rivers were lifelines, but also mysteries, sometimes generous, sometimes destructive. The desert winds whispered of distant gods, and the mountains to the north seemed like thrones of unseen powers. Every field was tilled with reverence, for the people knew their harvest depended on divine favor. Every brick laid in every wall was done with prayers, for even strong walls could fall without protection from above. When floods destroyed crops, it was not merely misfortune, it was the will of the gods. When fields blossomed with abundance, it was not merely skill, it was blessing. To live in Mesopotamia was to live in constant dialogue with unseen presences. The pantheon of gentle powerful gods of Mesopotamia were many, each with their own character, each holding quiet sway over human life. Anu, the sky god, distant and vast, was imagined as a father whose silence ruled above. Enlil, god of air and storms, carried the breath of the winds. Farmers bowed to him before sowing, for his favor could bring fertile breezes or devastating gales. Now Enki, god of water and wisdom, lived in the deep, shaping rivers, guiding floods, inspiring craftsmen and healers. Ninhursag, the mother goddess, was the womb of earth, the gentle hand of fertility. blessing both fields and women with new life. Inanna, Ishtar, radiant and complex, was goddess of love and war, joy and sorrow. Her myths told of passion, conflict, descent into the underworld. Shamash, the sun god, brought light and truth, watching with steady gaze as judge over both mortals and kings. Sinanna, the moon god, marked the passage of time, his silver glow steadying the nights. Each god was a presence felt daily. People woke with prayers, worked with prayers, slept with prayers. In every gesture, the divine was close. Myths as lullabies, the myths of Mesopotamia, were not only tales told for grandeur, they were soft explanations, soothing stories to help people understand the unpredictable world. Around fires and under stars, families told them as calmly as lullabies. One story told of how the world began, that the heavens and earth once were one, and from their parting came the first gods. Another told of the flood sent by the gods to wash away humankind, a great storm remembered with awe. Yet another whispered of Inanna's descent into the underworld, her journey through darkness, her silence, her return a story of loss and renewal. These myths did not thunder with certainty. They moved like rivers, slow, winding, filled with mystery. They offered comfort, that floods, storms, and deaths were not senseless, but woven into a larger story told by gods. The temple as the world's axis. At the center of each city rose a temple, sometimes crowned by a towering ziggurat. These were not mere buildings, they were bridges between worlds. To step into a temple was to step into the heart of the universe. Imagine climbing the steps of a ziggurat at dawn. The sky glows pink, the city below still drowsy. Each step carries you closer to the heavens, each step a slow breath upward. At the top, priests wait, incense curls upward, offerings are laid before the god shrine. The world feels both vast and intimate, as though heaven and earth lean close to whisper. Inside temples, the air was cool, dim, filled with smoke of burning offerings. Priests chanted softly, words rhythmic, steady. The walls were lined with statues of gods, their eyes wide, their presence silent yet heavy. People came not in haste, but in reverence, bringing bread, beer, sheep, or small tokens, each one a gesture of gratitude or plea that the temple was not only a place of worship, it was a storehouse of grain, a keeper of contracts, a hub of justice. But above all, it was the house of the gods, the silent heart of the city. Rituals of daily life religion was not confined to priests. In homes of mud brick, families offered prayers at small altars, setting aside bread, whispering blessings. Women prayed to Ninhursag for healthy births. Farmers prayed to Shamash before cutting barley. Merchants prayed to air before journeys, asking for safe waters and honest trades. Festivals carried the whole city into celebration. Drums beat slowly, flutes played gently, processions wound through streets. Statues of gods were carried on litters, draped in cloth and flowers, greeted with cheers and song. For days, work paused, life turned to joy, and the gods seemed close, walking among people. Yet even outside festivals, religion was steady like breath. Every act carried a prayer. Every season carried a ritual. The gods were never far, their voices always soft in the background. Dreams and omened people of Mesopotamia believed that the gods spoke not only in temples, but in dreams, in stars, in signs. Priests studied the movements of planets, the flight of birds, the patterns of liver in sacrificed animals. To them, the world itself was a text, a whispering book of omens. Imagine a priest gazing at the night sky. The constellations shine like silver, steady and silent. He traces their positions, murmurs their meanings. To him, each star is a mark in the divine script, each eclipse a word, each comet a sentence. He writes on clay tablets, pressing wedges carefully, recording what the heavens reveal. Dreams, too, were sacred. A farmer might dream of water overflowing its banks and wake with unease, believing it a warning of flood. A king might dream of victory or disaster and summon priests to interpret. Dreams were not private, they were shared, discussed, seen as messages carried softly by the gods. The silence of the underworld. Not all myths were comforting. The Mesopotamians believed in an underworld, a shadowy realm where the dead went after life. It was not a place of torment, but neither of joy. It was a quiet, dusty land, where souls lingered like faded echoes. Inanna's descent told of this place. 7 gates, each one stripping away ornaments, until the goddess stood naked before its queen. To descend was to lose, to enter silence. Yet even in this myth, there was return. Life and death were bound in cycles, like rivers flooding and receding for the living. The underworld was a reminder of humility. Life was precious, brief, fragile. Every harvest, every sunrise, every child's laughter was a gift from gods, fleeting and sacred. The gentle breath of faith religion in Mesopotamia was not thunder. It was not fire. It was breath soft, steady, ever-present. The gods were not distant rulers, but neighbors, companions, voices that moved with water and wind. People lived with them, worked with them, dreamed with them, and so, in the quiet courtyards, by the flowing canals, under the watch of ziggurats, Mesopotamians whispered their prayers, not always for greatness, but for rain, for harvest, for health, for peace. Their faith was woven into every moment, as gentle and enduring as the rivers themselves. When we speak of Mesopotamia, we often think of kings and temples, of ziggurats rising toward the heavens, of gods whispering in myths. Yet beneath all of that grandeur lay the quiet heart of civilization, the homes of ordinary people, the families who tilled the soil, baked the bread, fetched the water, raised the children, and repeated their lives in gentle cycles day after day. Civilization, after all, is not built by a few great names. It is sustained by countless quiet hands. The mud-brick home imagined stepping through the narrow streets of a Mesopotamian city. The houses lean close, their walls made of mud-brick, sun-dried, simple, warm. Most homes were small, a single-story structure, perhaps 2 rooms, with flat roofs where families might sleep on hot nights or dry their food in the sun. Some homes were larger, belonging to wealthier merchants or officials, with multiple rooms arranged around a small central courtyard. Inside, the walls were bare but smooth, the floors of packed earth or reed mats. Oil lamps gave a soft glow at dusk, their flames flickering gently. Clay jars lined the walls, filled with grain, dates, oil, and beer. Pots rested near the hearth, ready for cooking. Tools leaned against walls, sickles for harvesting, looms for weaving, mortars for grinding. There was no excess, no clutter. The home was humble but alive, filled with warmth from voices, from laughter, from daily work. The rhythm of the day life in Mesopotamia followed the steady rhythm of the sun and the seasons. At dawn, when the sky was pale and cool, families rose. Men often left for the fields or workshops. Women tended the hearth, ground grain, spun thread, wove cloth. Children helped where they could, fetching water, tending animals, learning their parents' trades. The first meal was simple: bread, dates, perhaps a sip of beer or milk. Work filled the day, unhurried but constant. Farmers guided plows pulled by oxen, their sandals pressing into damp soil. Potters turned their wheels slowly, shaping clay with steady hands. Weavers worked at looms, the soft rhythm of the shuttle filling the air. A timid day. The heat grew heavy. Families rested in the shade, sharing bread, figs, or lentil stew. The afternoon brought more work, but as the sun sank, the city softened. Fires were lit, children played in courtyards, and neighbors visited. Voices carried gently through narrow streets by night. The homes grew quiet. Families gathered on rooftops, lying on mats, gazing at the endless stars. The murmur of the day faded, replaced by the lull of crickets, the whisper of distant rivers. Sleep came not in silence, but in the soft music of life continuing. Food, and the gentle table food in Mesopotamia was simple but steady, drawn from the rivers and the soil. Barley was the staple grain, ground into flour for bread or fermented into beer. Wheat was rarer, but cherished. Dates grew in abundance, eaten fresh, dried, or boiled into syrup. Lentils, beans, onions, garlic, cucumbers, and melons filled the fields. Sheep and goats gave milk and meat, while rivers offered fish in endless supply. Meals were humble but nourishing. Bread was baked daily, flat loaves crisp from clay ovens. Stews simmered slowly, made of lentils, onions, and herbs. Dates sweetened dishes, while oil gave richness. Beer, thick and cloudy, was drunk from tall jars through reed straws, shared among family and guests. Eating was not hurried. It was a time of gathering, of stories, of laughter. Families sat together, dipping bread into stew, passing jars of beer, speaking softly about the day's work, the weather, the children. Food was not only sustenance, it was the gentle thread that bound people together. Clothing and craft clothing was simple, woven from wool or flax. Men wore skirts or tunics tied at the waist, women long dresses or shawls draped over their shoulders. Children often ran barefoot, their clothes light and loose. Wealthier families dyed their garments in soft colors, wore jewelry of beads, shells, or lapis lazuli. Weaving was a daily task, the loom a constant presence in homes. Women spun wool into thread, wove it into cloth, their motions slow, steady, rhythmic. The sound of weaving was as common as birdsong, as soothing as the flow of rivers. Craft filled every corner of life. Pottery, tools, baskets, toys, all were handmade with patience. Even the simplest jar held the touch of human care, the memory of hands that shaped it. Children and learning children were the heart of the home. Their laughter filled the streets. Their games echoed through courtyards. They played with clay figurines, small carts, balls, and reed whistles. They chased goats, splashed in canals, ran barefoot in the dust. Boys often followed their fathers, learning farming, herding, or trade. Girls learned from their mothers, weaving, cooking, tending the household. But some children, chosen or fortunate, were sent to schools run by scribes. There, they learned the art of writing, pressing reeds into clay tablets, repeating lines of signs until they became fluent. The lessons were strict, the discipline firm, but the reward was great. To become a scribe was to hold memory, to shape the future. Family and kinship. The Mesopotamian family was not only parents and children, but grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins. Kinship stretched outward, weaving a net of support. Families shared labor, cared for the young, protected the old. Marriage joined not just two people, but two households, two webs of kin. The home was a place of love, but also duty. Children respected parents, wives supported husbands, husbands cared for wives. Life was not always easy, but bonds were strong. The family was the anchor in a world of floods, droughts, and shifting rulers. The courtyard and the rooftop of every home had a heart. The courtyard. Here meals were cooked, bread baked, animals kept, neighbors greeted. The courtyard was alive with voices, with smoke rising, with the smell of fresh bread. The rooftop, too, was central, flat and wide. It was the place for sleeping on warm nights. for drying grain, for weaving baskets in the sun. From rooftops, families watched the city, the narrow streets below, the temples rising in the distance, the horizon stretching wide. It was a place of rest, of reflection, of quiet joy. Festivals and community life was simple. There was joy in festivals. Families dressed in their best, joined processions, sang songs, played drums and flutes. Children laughed, lovers met, elders told stories. The gods were honored, but so too was life itself. Festivals were not escapes, but celebrations of continuity, of survival, of community. At night, after festivals, families returned home tired but content. They slept deeply, dreaming of gods, of harvests, of another dawn. The gentle thread of continued tidily. Life in Mesopotamia was not marked by grand triumphs, but by repetition, sowing, harvesting, baking, weaving, raising children, telling stories. These acts, small and humble, sustained the great cities, fed the temples, supplied the kings. Without them, there would be no civilization. And so, when we imagine Mesopotamia, we must not only see ziggurats and kings, we must also see the mother, grinding grain in her courtyard, the father guiding oxen through a field, the child chasing a goat, the family lying under stars. Their lives were quiet, but it was their quiet persistence that carried civilization forward to the end of each day. As the lamps flickered and the city hushed, families drifted into dreams. The gods watched, the rivers flowed, and the gentle rhythm of life continued, unbroken, steady as the stars. Civilizations do not vanish completely. Even when their walls crumble and their fields turn to dust, something of them remains, an echo, a memory, a quiet influence carried forward. Mesopotamia, though long gone as a living world, has never truly disappeared. Its rivers have shifted. Its cities lie in ruins. Its people are dust beneath the soil. And yet, in so many ways, we are still living within its gentle inheritance. The silent stones of forgotten cities walk today among the ruins of Uruk or Yor, and the silence is heavy. The walls are low mounds of earth, the bricks melted by centuries of sun and rain. The great ziggurats stand broken, their stairways eroded, their tops long gone. The temples are only fragments, their columns half buried, their courtyards filled with sand. And yet, there is something alive in this silence. When the wind blows across the ruins, it feels like the whisper of voices long past. When the moonlight falls on shattered bricks, it seems to recall the glow of oil lamps that once flickered there. Every broken wall was once a home. Every courtyard once filled with laughter. Every doorway once touched by countless hands. Ruins are not dead. They are sleeping. They carry memory quietly, like old friends who no longer speak but still remember. The echo of writing. Perhaps Mesopotamia's greatest gift was writing. What began as small marks pressed into clay became the tool through which human memory extended beyond the fragile span of a lifetime. Even today, the wedge-shaped script of cuneiform lies preserved on clay tablets, buried in libraries of dust, waiting for rediscovery. These tablets speak still, when read, of grain rations, of marriages, of floods, of trade, of prayers. Some contain epic poetry, the Epic of Gilgamesh, among the oldest stories ever told. Imagine the wonder. Words pressed into clay for 1,000 years ago, silent through centuries, now once again read aloud. The voices of ancient scribes echo softly in our present, bridging time not with noise but with patience. Writing itself, in all its forms, is the living legacy of Mesopotamia. Every book, every poem, every letter carries within it a memory of that first reed pressing into wet clay. The laws that whisper still another legacy is law. The code of Hammurabi, etched on stone centuries ago, proclaimed that life needed rules, order, and fairness. Its words may sound stern, but behind them is the same desire we still share: to live peacefully, to protect the weak, to balance justice. Every court of law today, every constitution, every attempt at fairness owes something to those first careful codes. They were not perfect, but they were beginnings. They showed that humans could dream of order, of balance, of harmony among many voices. The rhythm of the cities of Mesopotamia were among the first. Streets, markets, walls, temples, they form the pattern that all later cities would follow. To walk through any modern city is to echo steps first taken in Mesopotamia. The hum of trade, the press of crowds, the sound of footsteps in narrow streets, all are descendants of those first bustling towns between rivers. And yet, despite the size and noise of our modern cities, there is something familiar: the family, eating together at dusk, the child playing in the street, the merchant arranging goods. These simple patterns remain unchanged. Civilization's body has grown vast, but its heartbeat remains the same. The myths that still sing, the myths of Mesopotamia, too, continue to flow beneath our culture like underground rivers. The story of the flood, carried into later traditions, the longing of Gilgamesh for immortality, echoed in every story of human restlessness. The descent of Inanna into the underworld, mirrored in tales of loss and return across cultures. These myths may no longer be told at family firesides, but they linger in books, in poetry, in art. They are not forgotten. They hum beneath our own stories, giving them roots. The quiet presence of the River Seven, the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, though changed, still flow. Their waters have carried generations, shifted their courses, flooded fields, quenched thirst. To stand at their banks is to feel continuity, the same current that fed the world's first farmers, that reflected the stars seen by the world's first cities. Water remembers. Every ripple carries the memory of hands that once scooped it, of children who once played in it, of farmers who once guided it into canals. The rivers themselves are a kind of legacy, whispering forward, the sleep of time. And yet, as with all civilizations, Mesopotamia rests now. Its people sleep beneath the soil, their names forgotten, their stories silent. But their work endures not as noise, but as a quiet foundation beneath all that came later. To think of Mesopotamia is not to recall a lost empire with sorrow, but to recognize a quiet continuity. The seeds planted there still grow in our words, our laws, our cities, our stories. We are not separate from them. We are their children. A lullaby across millennia. Imagine now, at the end of this journey, sitting at the edge of the ruins of yore, the stars spread above, vast and silent, just as they were for the ancient priests. The wind moves softly through the broken stones. Somewhere, an owl calls in the night. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the centuries fold away. You hear the murmur of voices in courtyards, the rhythm of weaving looms, the laughter of children. You smell bread baking, incense burning, earth freshly watered. You hear prayers whispered to gods long silent, and then it fades. The voices are gone, the lamps extinguished. Only the stars remain, eternal and quiet. This is Mesopotamia's true gift. Not noise, but persistence. Not shouts, but whispers. It endures like the night sky, soft, steady, always present. A lullaby across millennia.